position than in those chairs. So.
Thank you. I'm calling to order the meeting of the City of Salem and Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee for March 21st, 2024. Will the recorder please call the roll? Member
Belicheks?
Present.
Member Cohen?
Present.
Member Allen?
Here.
Member Manville?
Present.
Member Vera Brandel is absent. Member Stapleton?
I'm here.
Member Phillips?
Here.
Member Gwen?
Here.
Member Gonzalez? Absent. Member Julie Hoy?
Here.
Member Nordyke?
Here.
Member Varney?
Here.
Member Chris Hoy? Absent. Member Dixon?
Here.
Member Curtis?
Here.
Member Geyer?
Here.
Vice Chair Nishioka?
Here.
And Chair Brown is absent.
Thank you. We have additions. Oh, please join with me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have an additions agenda that was provided earlier this afternoon electronically and is also present at your desks this evening. It includes one staff report and one piece of public testimony. Can I please have a motion to approve the agenda, additions agenda?
I move that we add the additions agenda.
I'll second. Thank you. It's been moved by Member Stapleton and seconded by Member Gwynn. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion passes. Thank you. We will now move on to item 2 on the agenda, public testimony. There is no public testimony, but there was one piece that was sent in your additions, so hopefully you'll have an opportunity to look at that. Thank you. Thank you for bearing with me, as this is very new. And certainly if anything seems out of order, let me know. May I have, item 3, may I have a motion to approve the minutes of the March 14th, 2024 meeting?
I move approval of the minutes from the March 14th meeting.
I'll second.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion by Member Varney and seconded by Member Phillips. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed? Thank you. The motion passes. Number 4, action items. There are no action items this evening. I will now ask our CFO, Josh Engelston, to walk us through the information items outlined in the additions agenda.
Good evening, Chair and members of the committee. Josh Eggleston, Chief Financial Officer. As mentioned, there are 2 additions. One is a staff report with responses to member questions. And I will note, as I sent in my email, this isn't all the questions. We're still working on some and expect those to come at your next meeting on April 17th. And then we have some correspondence regarding Salem Ambulance Service. I'm happy to take any questions. And I do realize you just got them this afternoon.
We need to do something.
I have a question, I'm sorry, if I may.
Yeah. Yes, Member Bill, I know. Dixon, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Josh, I do appreciate the information, as always. I'm wondering if it's possible to get the additions agenda or at least earlier in the day of the meeting. It seemed like it came kind of tight to when we were going to start.
So right here.
Yeah, appreciate the question. So testimony, I believe our cutoff is 3 p.m. So you'll get an additional agenda after 3 p.m. If the questions are ready before then, we'll certainly make an effort to send those out. With the 1 week turnaround between meetings, it makes it difficult. Certainly for April 17th, you'll get any agenda items well in advance except for that testimony.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Chair.
Pardon me?
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm looking at the screen, so thank you. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
thank you, Chair. Just a follow-up on question number 4. Josh, you mentioned that the plan is the general fund will cover the whole downtown parking in fiscal year 25. Do you have a number on what you expect that cost to be?
I expect it to be $405,000.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
If this is questions to the responses to Budget Committee members' questions, I had a follow-up question on the fire staffing response. I believe it said that in 23-24 there were 3 FTE added for Kelly Days. I believe that the existing contract calls for yet more Kelly Days to occur starting July 1, 2024. So I was curious if those 3 Kelly Days that were added in 23-24 are in preparation of what's happening on July 1, or whether or not there will be a need for yet more Kelly Days next fiscal year to cover the reduction in available hours because of the contract addition.
I believe we have 3 planned additions for July 2024 to cover additional Kelly Days.
So we have the 3 this year and then 3 more next year.
Correct, yes.
So that's 6 FTE without adding any additional staffing for response.
Correct, to meet contractual obligations.
Okay, thank you.
Josh, could you explain Kelly Days?
I might defer to the fire department on that one.
Good evening, Mike Niblock, Fire Chief. Great question. A Kelly Day is, so firefighters generally work a 56-hour work week, total hours. So Kelly Day is an attempt to reduce their hourly work week closer to a 40-hour work week. So with each Kelly Day, they get that day off where the rest of their crew works. So that's what a Kelly Day is. So we have to have relief to relieve, have a person to fill that spot while that person's gone. I might add that we are throwing a trial next year, starting July 1st, where there will no longer be Kelly Days. We will go to a 4-shift platoon, and they will actually have debit days to pay back to the city. So we're looking at some alternative methods to be able to address work-life balance with our firefighters. Same number of hours worked, just a different schedule, and there will be no Kelly Days anymore after that, if that schedule sticks.
Could you tell us how long it might take before you would recognize if this new schedule would be better? Or
It's a 1-year trial.
1-year trial?
So we're
Thank
doing a
you.
1-year trial. So we contractually agreed to try a 1-year trial to change workload, work-life balance. And you can keep adding Kelly Days. A lot of places do that. Many departments our size that are running our call volume are looking at the 4th platoon or the 4th schedule. So they're 1 day on, 3 days off. They have no Kelly Days, but they have, I think, 15 debit days a year that they have to work. It's an extra day that they have to work to cover a shortage for us. So all those FTEs will be used to add that 4th shift. So it's the same number of FTEs, it's the same number of hours worked. It's a better schedule for the firefighters to have more rest period between. They run 100 calls a day, so it's a busy schedule. And so a lot of departments are looking at that schedule for work-life balance for their employees.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Yes, Member Hoy.
Thank you. Is this an opportunity to ask questions about anything within the budget? Is that?
Can you help me out on that one?
We're always here to answer your questions,
Okay.
whatever they may be.
Thank you. In that case, Josh, this is going to be a big question, and it might sound out there, but I got to throw the ball. If we were to consider funding public safety first, how would we go about that? And when would that need to begin, that process need to begin?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. It would begin with a motion. I think probably either at the Budget Committee or the City Council for staff to bring back a proposal for what that might look like. We'd want to have additional conversation to understand what that means to you. Public safety can have different definitions, certainly.
I'd love to have that conversation if we could. I'll reach out.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, then, I think that we now move on to hear from Krishna Namburi, our Deputy City Manager.
Good evening. Krishna Namburi, Deputy City Manager for the Enterprise Services Department. I will start my presentation today by giving an overview of the journey of the department's journey over the past 3 years. Enterprise Services is a relatively new department. It was formed in 2021 by consolidating several departments under one umbrella. And our fundamental philosophy as a department is in the understanding that despite budget challenges and increasing operational needs, strategic management has to be to the core of how the business functioning. So with that, what you see here, having those three engines, so we are IT, we're a bunch of engineers, so we have to talk about it from engines. The strategy, operations, and budget, right? So having those three engines synchronize and work together is the key in enhancing our services and in advancing our services. So this model has been a proven model in the IT department before, so we kind of brought the same methodology to the Enterprise Services Department. And this is the organizational structure for the department. The department consists of IT, HR, fleet, facilities, risk, customer service center, and I'm pretty sure I'm missing some other departments underneath, but and other services that we offer. And when we decided to consolidate these departments under one umbrella, it was pretty clear to me that we have to do some strategic restructuring of our services. There are two main goals with that. One, we were not able to provide critical services to the departments. And number two, we needed to bring enterprise approach to internal services. So that's kind of how the structure has been made with those two as main goals. As part of this restructuring, we did repurpose several positions from director level to staff level. So this organization structure is very different than how it was before. As you can see, there are sections that focus on strategy. There are divisions that focus on operations. The structure also reflects our department mission to look at services from futuristic perspective. So the section that you see towards the right end of the chart, which is the Center of Excellence, and that's the section that drives innovation, efficiency, and high standards for our services. The piece that I do want to kind of highlight, even though this structure brought a lot of organizational efficiencies to internal services, unfortunately, it added a lot more workload for individuals because each of them had to pick up multiple job responsibilities. So the managers that you see there, each of them have several services under their portfolio. So there is a lot going on in each of those columns. This is just a snapshot of different services that we offer and the funds that cover those services. IT, HR, and facilities is covered through general fund, and we have workers' comp, liability, and benefits through is a self-insured funds. We also offer other services through city services funds. I won't spend too much time going over the next two slides, but in a nutshell, we have $88.2 million budget. This includes the general fund part of it is $22.7 million. And this is, that money is spent to provide services to all of the departments, not just general fund. So we provide services to all the departments in the city. So this slide shows our position growth over the past 10 years. I'll go ahead and start explaining the information technology because you do see like an increase in position count there. So that is reflects the initiative we took in 2015 to increase our service growth and also to bring organizational efficiencies. So prior to 2015, IT resources were decentralized. Departments had their own IT resources or IT positions. So to optimize resource allocation and also to avoid duplicate work, we consciously made a decision to centralize all IT resources under the IT department. So that resulted in 9 positions coming to the IT department. And the second piece that contributed to that growth, Public Works and also other non-general fund departments like Building and Safety, their technology needs significantly grew over the years. So Public Works funded 6 positions under the IT department, and Building and Safety funded 2. So that's kind of the other growth that happened there. And so those are paid by Utility Fund and Building and Safety Fund. The actual positions that were added to the IT department through general fund were 4. And those 4 positions were added to focus on cybersecurity and network infrastructure. Just to kind of, for the context of it, over the past 10 years, our infrastructure grew, like it doubled, like number of servers, storage needs, and the applications, we doubled. So even though we added 4 positions, it's still extremely difficult to manage that infrastructure because of the growth that happened with the technology. Oh, let me cover the, sorry. On the HR, on the facilities side of it, we added 5 positions in 2021, and that was because of the new police station. And those positions were funded by general fund. And in 2024, we added 2 positions because of the new Public Works operations building. Human resources, even though you kind of see some growth there, we brought payroll from finance under Enterprise Services Department, so that kind of growth happened in 2023. And also Public Works funded a dedicated business partner position to meet their business need. So that's kind of why you see a growth of 6 positions there. All right, so I'll quickly go over what we're doing well and where we are struggling. I do want to end my presentation on a positive note, so I'm just going to go through challenges first, and then we'll talk about where we are doing well. So what I wanted to highlight here is the cause and effect, right? So the workload, the increase in workload is making it difficult for us to retain employees, and our service demands are increasing every single day. What that's really causing is the overhead that comes with it. We're constantly prioritizing tasks and resources, and we are moving staff around with the different responsibilities, and that's definitely an overhead on the management of those resources. The other two key pieces that I do want to talk about is consequences of inaction and lost opportunity cost. So consequences of inaction is we know that we need to do something today in order to meet the need. But if we are postponing that for later, it is going to cost us more. So there is a huge financial impact of not taking care of that right now. For example, if we're not able to upgrade systems on time, or we are postponing our system replacements, we know that it is going to cost at some point, and the cost is going to be significantly more than taking care of it today. The lost opportunity cost, this is something that we need to be paying attention to, so this is when we sacrifice that gain, potential gains, by choosing one option over another, right? So, for example, if we are not bringing technology solutions to help with the workload of the departments, we have to add more resources, right? So that's going to be much bigger cost than bringing a solution to the organization. Not investing in innovation, not investing into training, staff with new skills, especially on the technology side. I'm talking about the overall city employees, right? So there is that. This is a tangible, intangible cost, because it's hard to define that, but we do know that it limits your service growth. The last piece is the rapid technology changes. This is something that we have been handling over the past, I think, 10 years. It has been much more than before. The technology is changing at a pace that we're just not funded to address it. We're just not able to keep up with it. So there are increasing costs associated with that. And so just kind of a final thing on all these causes, the longer we wait to address these, the higher the cost of ownership is going to be for us. And so let's talk about the good part. So I'm very proud of the department's enterprise first mindset. Our partnership with the departments, unions, and staff are very strong, and our staff are resilient, and I've seen them over the past 2 decades about how well they do with their adaptability to change is one of our key strengths. And I do want to take this opportunity to thank the staff under my departments about the incredible work that they do day in and day out. It's not, being an internal services department, it's often we don't get the attention like external services, good or bad. But we are the foundation for the organization. And I think it's important to keep that foundation strong, to be able to give that ability for departments to provide those services. So I'll highlight the center. Of course, the center of all these trends is my favorite one, innovation. Innovation, especially with AI right now, is giving us that opportunity to rethink our services. I do think it's an exciting place to be in. I think the future is very bright. Our work in exploring AI for city services started 10 months ago, or 8 to 10 months ago. And this is one of those projects, no resources, no funding, and a significant potential, right? So definitely it has been a fun experience, just to kind of see how do we make this work. So we formed the AI committee with 14 staff members from different departments. And our focus over the past, the first 6 months has been, let's kind of create that foundation that is needed for AI. If we want to move forward with those AI initiatives, we have to have a very clear understanding on what, how, and where we're going to use AI, right? So having those policies on how AI is going to be implemented for the city, I think that's kind of the key. So we have been working on that. And the second piece of it is explainability. I think this is very important for me. That's kind of my, I want to make sure that when we are deploying AI solutions, we are able to explain what it is. We want to be transparent. We want to be, have that trust from our consumers. I think that's important. So we did kind of talk about how we're going to deploy these solutions. So right now, we are focusing on 3 different things. One is the AI solutions that help with the staff workload. That's kind of number one, because that is the key piece where we are struggling as an organization. The second one is the solutions that reduce our operational costs. And the third one is the AI for service delivery. And the third one is where I think there is some kind of an investment that is needed. If we want to rethink our services differently, we do have to invest into that. So to conclude, the department has the right strengths. We have the right model. And we have amazing workforce. And I'm very thankful. And I honestly feel privileged to come to work every day and work with the amazing staff that we have. And we are looking forward and excited to bring some of these opportunities to city services. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Member Curtis.
Thank you. So I was just having a discussion yesterday about AI and it replacing humans. So can you just give us, the pros and the cons? And I can see the pros, I really can. But I think the cons are really scary to those of us of a certain age, maybe. But can you kind of give us a few examples of what you're talking about when you talk about reducing costs, service delivery, helping with workload? I mean, I sort of envisioned, if you're interacting with somebody on a water bill and you have a dispute, that could potentially be not a human interacting with that citizen. But I don't know what else. I would hate to see a lot of people get laid off because of AI, but I can really see how it would help reduce some of those personnel costs. So.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So, and I have been very clear on this to pretty much everybody I talk to in the city. So this is not to reduce staff resources, or this is not to lay off people, right? I can give an example. In one of my departments, in the HR department, the HR business partners spend quite a bit of time answering some of the questions that the employees have. For example, how does it work with the maximum vacation accruals, right? Even though the contract is there, it's kind of different for different people. Being able to have a solution, right, a self driven solution where employees should be able to go to using that service agent or a chatbot, AI chatbot. We can provide all the materials. Instead of staff looking at that and answering, the employee should be able to go get that answer immediately. And the chatbot will have that option to go look at, hey, are you talking about from police or fire? Or so that's the reducing. When I say reducing the operational costs, adding resources to deal with the workload is also cost to the city. If we can bring solutions and help with the staff workload, that does decrease the amount of resources that I need to operate right now, right? So this is basically, to the way I call it, having everybody having their own personal assistant to kind of take care of things, right? So going back to your original question, the success with AI really depends based on how we implement it. So there is a human piece that is involved everywhere. It only assists you with it. we have to go through the content, validate. And I did talk about the AI explainability. If we are deploying something, to whether it is to our employees or outside of the externally, we will have a very strong explainability piece that goes with it. So everybody should know what they're getting from humans versus what they're getting from AI.
Are there any other questions? Oh, yes. Member Dixon, please, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Krishna, I was listening to your narrative, and I really appreciate the explanation. One of the things I'm hearing is this sort of metastasizing demands that keep growing and growing and growing, including the demand to keep up with constantly changing technology. Is there anybody in the organization thinking about limiting demand, or is your department only in a position to accept that the demands are growing at an ever increasing rate and that your job is to try to keep up with it?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think I kind of talked about it a little bit when I was addressing the weaknesses, right? So the increase in demand, I'm just going to take an example as like HR, right? So we have to be able to, we have to make sure that we have good relationship with the unions. We have to make sure our employees are taken care. When an issue is kind of brought to our attention, we need to address that immediately, right? So that's kind of one of the demands. If we don't take care of it today, it is going to cost us later, right? And even with the technology demand, it's not necessarily the departments are creating it. That's the pace the world is going with, right? So a lot of times we don't have an option. We bring a solution to the city. 2 years later, they say, hey, you have to upgrade to the next level. This is just like your phone. Once you buy it, after 3 years, you're almost forced to replace it. So that's the increase in service demand that I'm talking about. Some are not in our control. The other pieces, with the departments, as they're not able to increase their resources, they're looking for technology solutions to get some help. So not providing that service to them, then they're not able to serve the community the way they need to. So a lot of times it is almost like out of our control with the increase in demand. And these are not unreasonable services that they're asking us to provide.
Thank you.
Yes, Member Cohen.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to ask 2 questions. The first is on information security. It's very obvious that we're in a very dangerous world, and it's only getting more dangerous. Bad actors are out there that can send a Trojan horse malware to infect not only just a computer, but could disrupt municipalities' ability for stormwater, wastewater, electricity, things of that nature. Luckily for you, you don't have to worry about electricity and power grid. My question is, how is Salem doing with information security, and how has your department kept pace with cybersecurity threats?
Yeah, I'm kind of very hesitant to answer this question the moment I say everything is going well, right? I'll tell you, I think where we are doing really well, we have very competent staff in that area, right? And I think in a way that we got really lucky that our staff that have been with us for 20 plus years have done a really incredible job in maintaining that security aspect of it. And being said that, the threats are every day you see kind of a new one coming our way, right? I am concerned about what's going to happen when the staff retire or the staff decide to go somewhere else, especially the ones that have done an incredible job maintaining the security. I'm concerned about that. I'm also concerned about, I don't think it's going to be one-to-one replacement with that because of the expertise and the competency that they bring, each of them probably do 2 to 3 FTE equivalent job, right? So that's something that I'm concerned about what it is for the future. But we are actually, we strategically invested in training for this cybersecurity. A lot of times it is not that network security, it is what the user does to bring that threat into the organization. So we have been very proactive in bringing that training to the city staff.
And the second question is regarding self-insurance. How does Salem compare to other cities? And if we were to move away from the model of self-insurance to some third party doing insurance, would that be a savings or would that be negative?
I have to get back to you on that with more information. Josh, do you have any response to that? I think the last time we did the analysis was, I don't know how many years ago.
So some things we are fully insured on where we don't have self-insurance. So like for property, we do have property coverage, things like that. For a lot of the things that we are self-insured, we might not be able to find coverage just in this environment, but it's certainly something we can explore and bring more information back.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Wonderful, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we have our Community Planning and Development Director, Kristen Rutherford.
Good evening. I'm Kristen Rutherford, formerly known as the Urban Development Director, reimagined, rebranded, and relaunched in 2023 as the Community Planning and Development Director. And in the last couple of weeks, I seem to have picked up a side hustle as a spokesperson for Hall's Cough Drops. So I'm going to apologize in advance if my moonlighting gig here impacts this presentation. So I'm going to start with an overview of our funds and budget, and then I'm going to talk about the departmental merger that happened over the last year. So community planning and development is made up of 6 divisions. We have the Urban Development Division, Salem Housing Authority, Compliance Services, Planning, Building and Safety, and Development Services. Excluding the Salem Housing Authority, the department touches 15 funds and 47 cost centers and has $177 million in budget authority. With the Housing Authority, our budget authority comes to $213 million. Much of that budget authority rests in urban renewal construction funds, which cross-connect with our Public Works Department for project implementation. However, this slide here does not reflect the Housing Authority or the Urban Renewal Tax Increment Funds because those sit in different budgets. Many of our funds are restricted and limited for specific purposes. Some examples of that are the Building and Safety Fund, our federal entitlement funds, tax increment, leasehold revenues, parking district revenues, and trust funds. The trust funds, just an example, include things like our Blight to Bright program or enterprise zone penalties. So we have a few funds that are experiencing some pretty significant pinch points. Downtown parking is one of those areas. So this fund is primarily sourced through the downtown parking tax, the parking district, where the businesses pay a tax so that downtown parking can be free to customers. Increases to this tax are capped at 2% a year or the CPI, whichever is less. Because of that cap, this fund has been significantly impacted and has not kept up with inflation. This fund's also been impacted by the loss of key payers into the system like Nordstrom's and JCPenney. And I know there's been a lot of talk over the years in the community about how these businesses have left Salem because of impacts of homelessness. And so I want to speak to that just a little bit because it kind of ties into this tax model. Because the homelessness issue is something that affects cities around the nation, and it's not the driver of closure of these big department stores. That is really tied to changes in retail business models and an old model that's just not viable in the same way anymore due to the growth of online retail. So these store closures are occurring in chains around the nation, not just here in Salem. And the nature of downtowns is changing. So it's changing from being anchored by big department stores to increased residential serving as the anchor, served by smaller retail uses. And that shift makes a funding model like our parking tax kind of a big, hot structural mess. It just doesn't work right anymore because we have fewer big businesses to pay the tax to operate the system and more residents using the system that aren't paying the tax. So within the parking fund, the operational costs are increasing at far more than that 2% a year. And so we don't have sufficient funding for maintenance of the parking in garages, security, cleaning services, downtown beautification programs like flower baskets, or downtown promotion. So it's a broken fund that's been supported over the last few years by COVID funds, the general fund, operating fees, those sorts of things, and by balancing it out by just eliminating services. So our plan to correct this is to move to a performance-based parking system for on-street parking. And this is going to shift the cost of operating that system from the businesses to the users of the system. So with the performance-based system, users who want the convenience of parking on street will pay for that location. So whether they're customers, residents, or employees. The customer parking will remain free in the parking garages, and residents and employees will have the option of paying to park on street or paying to use permitted spaces within the parking garages. So with this shift, we would maintain our low-cost daily permits, which are helpful for part-time employees and minimum wage employees. And the parking fund also generates revenue through permit sales to employees and residents. But currently, our code doesn't require that residents have permits in the parking garages. And so a lot of them do park on street overnight and during the day and do the parking shuffle. So moving to this new system is also going to help streamline our enforcement process, and it's going to eliminate some of the user and enforcement challenges that we have, like the return to block restriction, which is very confusing for people that park downtown, or employee and resident on-street parking restrictions, where a lot of employees, instead of paying permits in the parking garages, will park on street, even though those spaces should be used for customers, and it's a big challenge for enforcement. So we've had a kickoff meeting with consultants, and we'll be starting outreach and sharing information on the project later this spring. Sometimes I'm asked if we could sell the parking garages, and some of you might be wondering that same thing. So the answer is yes, but at this time, there's no market for them. So as long as people can park for free on street, converting parking garages to privately owned garages that charge for use just isn't going to be a viable model. So another area where we're having some pinch points is in our SDC funds and a little bit in our community renewal and federal program funds. So with our SDC funds, we're experiencing some challenges due to rising project costs and greater requests for waivers for affordable housing projects. So we started these waivers a few years ago to help incentivize affordable housing. It's been a great tool to do that, but it was never factored into the SDC model. And so we're finding that it is having a negative impact on the fund balance. SDCs are system development charges. Yes, they're the impact fees. So that's having an impact on the availability of funds to complete our capital projects. So starting this calendar year, we are working with the Public Works Department to revisit the model and look at options for stabilizing these funds and establishing criteria, more clear criteria for how funds are expended. We're also seeing greater demand for our entitlement funds through HUD. So those are Community Development Block Grant funds and home funds, but particularly where we're seeing the increased demand is in the funds for social services. The funds that we can make available for social services through these HUD programs is capped at 15%. So that's 15% of our annual community development block grant entitlement. Our asks for these funds greatly exceed the 15% that we have available. So it's another little challenge there that's with the fund, but then also just the need in the community for these kinds of services. On the housing construction side, we have more fund availability, but the challenges there is that using those funds is complicated by the amount of time it takes for projects to come to fruition, the environmental processes that are required by HUD for these projects. And HUD does an annual timeliness test for these funds where we have to get money out the door and we can't keep more than 1.5 times our annual entitlement. And so as projects get delayed, as we have supply chain challenges, as there are environmental challenges, it makes it kind of tricky to get that money out the door in that kind of time frame. While this presentation does not include, or this slide doesn't include urban renewal, I want to mention a couple of things about urban renewal. A month ago, we shared the status of all our urban renewal areas to the Urban Renewal Agency Board. I think that's some information that might be helpful to this group. It's on the website under that agenda. If you can't find it there, please reach out to me or to Josh and his staff, and we'll get you a copy of that. I think it'll be helpful because it lays out where we are in our maximum indebtedness for each urban renewal area, our timelines for closing different urban renewal areas, and kind of what's been accomplished in those urban renewal areas. And talks a little bit about where we may consider creating new urban renewal areas. So urban renewal gives us a tremendous leverage to supplement other funds and make projects happen that wouldn't without that tool. Because of our urban renewal and some of our other incentive programs, we've achieved a number of infill multifamily projects that would not have occurred otherwise. The presentation that we shared, talks a little bit more about that. So just a couple of things with closing urban renewal areas to also keep in mind is that out of the tax increment that we receive each year, if we close down urban renewal areas, only about a third of that increment comes back to the city. The rest of it gets shared with the other taxing districts like county, schools, et cetera. Also, we cannot close down urban renewal areas until we have satisfied all of our debt and our contractual requirements. So it's not an immediate process. But I'm happy to come back and talk more about that at some other time. And like I said, a lot of that's in the staff report also. Next slide. So this chart does not reflect all the FTE in the department. So in addition to the 95.5 FTE shown on this slide, the department also includes development services, which moved over from the Public Works Department in 2023, bringing 18 FTE. And it also includes the Salem Housing Authority with 65 FTE. So our department, our new rebranded department, has a total of 178.5 FTE and operates under separate entities with 3 different governing bodies: the Salem City Council, the Salem Urban Renewal Agency Board, and the Salem Housing Commission. So I think this earns us the prize for being the most budgetarily and organizationally complex department in the city. I'm not sure what that prize is, but we win. So across the department, our positions are funded by user fees, federal funding, property and leasehold, property rent and leasehold revenue, urban renewal tax increment, and the general fund. And then under those different fees, we have a wide variety of fees, from planning and permit fees, building and safety fees, and wholesale fees. With this recent reorganization, we have lessened some of our general fund burden on the managerial side of things, which has freed up capacity to use those general fund resources elsewhere. It's also creating additional streamlining and efficiencies, allowing us to improve our service to the community. So this is the new department structure following last year's mergers. So these mergers have allowed strategic alignment around key council priorities, including housing production and affordable housing. They've brought everything that's development related under one umbrella, and it helps us to create a more unified culture and develop streamlined processes and procedures in working with the development community. So it's going to take us probably another year or so to fully update all of the processes and procedures and start achieving the full benefits of the merger, but we have made a great deal of progress in the last 6 months. The department now includes the public infrastructure permitting side of development, including engineering and survey functions, and that's all housed under the Development Services Division. So those positions are primarily funded by the utility funds and permit fees, and we'll be evaluating those fees in the future to assure greater cost recovery, because we're not at 100% fee-based cost recovery there. The Planning Division includes current and long-range planning and historic preservation, and these positions are funded by a mix of permit fees and general fund, and we'll also be revisiting those fees to make sure that we are keeping pace with the cost of service. The Building and Safety Division includes staff who issue building permits, do plan reviews, and provide inspections, and this is fully funded by fees. Compliance Services includes code enforcement, parking enforcement, multifamily licensing, and currently the park ranger. That position is migrating to the Parks Department. Positions here are funded by fees in the general fund. And while the parking district is its own fund, not all parking related revenue accrues to that fund. So a lot of that, like fines, meter revenue that's out around town, outside of downtown, that goes to the general fund, and then those resources come back to pay for parking staff and operations outside of the parking district. The Urban Development Division includes urban renewal and economic development program managers, real estate services for the city, that includes managing all of our leasehold spaces downtown and out at the airport, as well as doing any right-of-way acquisition for capital projects. Downtown revitalization, federal and housing programs, and our finance and budget group. So these positions are funded through a mix of urban renewal tax increment, federal funds, capital projects, the parking district, leasehold, and general fund. And then lastly, we have the Salem Housing Authority, which operates on a completely different fiscal year than the rest of the city and goes through a completely separate budget process. So they develop, own, and operate affordable housing, partner with private sector affordable housing developers, and operate programs like the Section 8 voucher program, family self-sufficiency, homeless outreach, and a number of other programs. So those positions are all funded through federal funds, properties, their operation budgets for rental income and grants. And that concludes everything I wanted to share tonight.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Member Cohen.
Thank you. Just want to confirm, so no general fund for the Salem Housing Authority?
The only general fund in the past that has gone to the Salem Housing Authority was for the HRAP program, and that funding is going away.
Okay. How many cities in Oregon have their own housing authority? Do you know?
I think that most are county housing authorities, or they are completely independent of the cities. I'm not aware of another city where it's umbrellaed under the city in the same way.
Okay. Thank you. To a different question, side of the brain, I'd like to talk about permitting processes in Salem.
Mm-hmm.
We are in a housing deficit right now, so one would think that housing projects would be booming right now. What is the process, and how does Salem compare to other cities when it comes to, if I'm a developer, I submit to you my plans, how long does it take for it to come back? Are we competitive in that manner that would make people want to come and build here versus building in Lane County in Albany or somewhere else? Sorry, Lynn County in Albany. And I think you talked about looking at your fee permits.
Did we lose track again?
Have you talked to the developers, builders, people within our community about their side of it? Like if they think that it's fair, if there's red tape or things of that nature to help, start building in Salem?
That's a whole lot of questions. Okay, so I'm going to back up to a process that we went through last year at this time, where we brought on a consultant, Moss Adams, to look at our permitting process and to interview the development community to establish those questions, find out where there are complications, and make recommendations for how we can streamline. That's what led to this merger. Okay, so we had previously functions spread across a couple of different departments, which could lead to some confusion for developers as to where processes were being slowed down. And so by pulling everything together so that we've got the planning, building, and the development infrastructure side of things all together, it's improving that communication between all of those groups. We're looking at things like modifying the application processes so that instead of having 3 separate kinds of applications, we're doing it all on one application. You asked about timelines. So I would like to come back with that information written down rather than try to share all of that here. We, as a follow-on to that recommendation from the Moss Adams report, we've started doing regular meetings with Home Builders Association. I'm personally doing monthly meetings with Mike Erdman. And then on a quarterly basis, my management team and some other staff are meeting with home builders and engineers, development-related service providers within the community and developers to go through the report, the implementation of these different modifications, and how we can make that system work better. With regard to the fees, they are aware that this is something that we will be evaluating, and they will definitely be a part of the conversation. Did I get all of your questions? Okay.
Great, thank you very much. Member Nordyke, you had your hand up first and left for a moment, so I'm going to go ahead and go to you first, and then I'll get to Member Dixon.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Thank you so much, Kristen, first of all, for all you do, and congratulations on your new role. It's still a mouthful, and CPDD does not make for a clever acronym, so feels like an important oversight in my opinion, but it's fine, it's fine. I think it would be helpful, first of all, this slide in front of us is very helpful because it helps me and the other members of the committee see the forest from the trees. Given how much pressure that is on our general fund this year, one thing I would love to ask all of our departments is some sort of different chart that shows what percentage of these funds are general funds, so that we know, because I think everyone on Budget Committee understands some of these funds are restricted. They can be used for one thing and one thing only. Some are not, and just understanding that takes a lot of time. So having a chart that helps me identify where general funds even reside is helpful, similar to what Member Cohen was saying, because yes, currently HRAP gets some funds, but that program is sunsetting. So I think in the future, that would be helpful for me, and I dare say other members of the committee to see. Thank you.
Councilor, I would like to say that one of my staff recommended that our new name is the Office of Community Development, the OCD. They really liked that.
All right. Then Member Dixon, you had a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, I have 2. Kristen, thank you for all of the information. Could you clarify for me the number of urban renewal districts that don't have any outstanding debt, any outstanding obligations, and that could be closed, and how much tax revenue for the city that would free up?
So the only one that is in that position today is the Fairview Urban Renewal Area, which has already stopped collecting tax increment, and that is already flowing back to the city. All others do have debt or commitments at this time.
And how long does it take once an urban renewal district is without commitments to close it out and get that money back on the regular tax roll?
It's probably close to a 9-month process, probably about a year and a half before it actually starts accruing back to the city, because you have to kind of go through the tax cycle.
Thank you. And then why is the HRAP program funding ending? I see in option 1, which is the staff's recommended proposal for closing the deficit, the budget deficit, there is a recommendation to end special program outreach, which I think is accounting for about $625,000 in general fund. Is that program ending because of a staff recommendation, or is it ending because a revenue stream is ending?
So we're shifting this over to grant funding. We have grant funding for at least the next couple of years to operate this.
Okay, so the program's not ending, just the general fund expense.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Member Stapleton.
Thank you. Thank you, Kristen. Always great to get your reports. I did want to circle back to Member Cohen was saying that we might be the only city that has our own housing authority. I don't know if that's true or not. I think you're right. I think we are unique, and I think that we are uniquely successful as well. So I think they're doing amazing stuff over there, as I think everybody here agrees. And if it is unique, I think maybe some cities should start looking to us to see how to get going on some of those really great projects. I did have a question for you on the paid parking downtown. I, for one, am really excited about this. I know both me and Chair, we both kind of oversee or we have that area in our wards. And I just hear so many positive things about this moving forward, especially from our downtown business owners. Just really excited to see that user paid system where we're going to start seeing quicker turnover in those parking spots and therefore an increase in the availability for people to get to those businesses. So really excited about the developments there. Do you have a timeline on any kind of community outreach that we're going to be doing with this program as we move forward?
Yes, that'll be starting later this spring.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Member Curtis, please.
Thank you. So just to be really clear, you are recommending that there's no more free parking downtown? I mean, I know I read that a while ago, too.
We're recommending that there's no more free on-street parking. There will continue to be free within the parking.
Okay, yes, that's what I meant. Okay, just want to make that clear. And then I have a really, maybe it's a simplistic question, but on slides 39 and 40, where you have the revenues or the resources and the expenditures, there's like a $16.6 million difference. And I'm just wondering if that's because what comes in for revenue goes out to other things besides your department. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, I don't know what you
Yes, please. That would be great.
It's a really good question. So for the general fund dollars, if you had a chance to read the question, so general fund dollars should match pretty closely for department expenditures. For other funds, like on this slide right here for budgeted resources, building and safety is at 24.68. And if you go to the next slide, building and safety is at 8.4 million.
Right.
So they're carrying a balance in that fund. So it's budgeted resources, it's not necessarily annual revenues. So it includes that beginning fund balance, that checking account that carries forward year after year. So that's the difference between the budgeted resources and expenditures.
Yes. So is that something that we can look at as we're trying to find nickels and dimes for our budget, or no?
As Kristen mentioned, building and safety is extremely restricted by state statute. And I will say the fees haven't increased since 2013. So they're extremely low, even in the market. They're just very efficient and have been building a fund balance.
Okay.
Thanks, Josh.
Yes. Member Hoy, go ahead.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions that I've been challenged to ask. So The cost of development has skyrocketed, as Member Cohen alluded to, I believe. SDCs, traffic control improvements, et cetera, seem to be taking the local developer largely out of our market. Our profits are going elsewhere. How would you respond to that?
I would respond that our system development charges are currently like really in the middle when you start looking at other communities in the area. We're not at the top of the market. What's driving costs is land and the cost of developing the infrastructure and building materials. Those are the real drivers.
Thank you. When you said infrastructure, it struck me, I think a bunch of money came down from, it was either federal or the state, and I think Salem received like $300,000 for infrastructure. Is that correct? Do you know about that?
I'm not sure which funds these are that you're speaking about.
I can't remember the name of them.
If I may, the only
90 million?
300,000 I'm aware of in the recent legislative session, 300,000 was awarded to a development as a pass-through grant to the Applegate Veterans Housing over in West Salem. So it's not city funds. We'll just simply be accepting and then
it'll be a pass-through.
Yeah.
But thank you for that. And another question. Most of the buildable land here in Salem is on such a hill, it's not cost efficient, like you were saying, for infrastructure to get what would need to be there to make it viable. Is it possible to change the definition of buildable land?
So I think that the answer to that question kind of ties into some recent state legislation that allows some adjustments to urban growth boundaries and expansion of urban growth boundaries. I've had this conversation recently with Home Builders Association about whether or not we could do a swap of land from land that is, really difficult to serve to land in other areas that would be easier to serve. I have not had a conversation to talk with our planning administrator about that. I don't know what sort of limitations or other restrictions there may be on that at this point in time. But if it's something that we could feasibly do, I would certainly I would entertain that.
And how would that happen? What's the process for getting that ball rolling?
I'm not sure at this point in time because this is something that just came out in recent legislation. And so the mechanism for making that happen, I'm not sure, and I'm not even sure if the planning staff has had an opportunity to examine that yet.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions? Yes, Member Manville.
Thank you, Chair. Director, compliments on your staff. I work with planning staff across the state, and you have some of the rock stars.
Thank you.
Yes, I appreciate the work of your department. Do you have a timeline on when the performance-based pricing might be implemented? You said like outreach this spring, and then when might we be seeing that implemented?
I would say we're about a year out from implementing that. There's quite a bit of a lead time on procuring the equipment.
If there's no other questions, then I would like to ask a couple. So with this new change in how you've formulated the new structure of the departments, and within those departments, it looks like you're working on a lot of mechanisms for fees paying for things, and it feels like that's helping each of these departments, and that it's also reducing the burden on general funds. Am I getting kind of that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
And so one of the examples I might give is I've been approached by citizens concerned with the increased cost of sign permits. And what I understand and passed on back to them is that the fees hadn't increased for some time, but they have now when people get a new sign permit. And in that process of the increase, that's paid for a staff person to be able to manage it all. And again, so that that person, instead of being paid through general funds, is now being paid by the fees that are generated, which I think is a wonderful thing, that we can make sure that staff is being paid by the structure of the fees that are there. So again, I just want to confirm that I'm understanding that right.
That's correct. We have a number of fees that have not been increased in a very long time. Josh had mentioned the building and safety fee, how long it's been since that has been increased. Another example is the daily permits for residential parking zones. It's been 20 years since that fee's been increased. It's $2.50 for a pack of 25. So,
okay. Maybe we can go up to $3. Whoa. Then there was, let's see, I was going to ask one other question and it's escaped me. But if I remember, I'll come back.
Okay.
Thank you for the report.
You are very welcome.
And again, if there's no other questions, we shall move on.
All right. Thank you very much.
So now we have the office manager, legal, mayor, and council, and non-departmental, Josh.
All the fun ones grouped together. So we're going to go through these fairly quickly unless you have any questions. The city manager's office right here, you can see the program budget there on the left for fiscal year 2024. I decided breaking out the actual programs might be more helpful than a solid pie chart. As you can see, board and commission support, city council support, citywide planning and initiatives, communication strategy delivery, community partnerships and engagement, diversity, equity, and inclusion, organizational management, policy analysis, and homeless and sheltering coordination. On the right, for how it's funded, it's for all these services, they're in the general fund. There is an indirect cost allocation recovery or a support service charge that reimburses the general fund for those services. So, for example, the time is split out by number of employees and budgeted expenditures, or actual expenditures, as one metric, one methodology for how we allocate the city manager's office costs across all 24 funds in the city. Career full-time equivalent positions. There's a story here. It's quite long, but we've landed at 6 in fiscal year 2024. There's been a few reorgs throughout there. The most recent one is the Community Services Department that was consolidated with Parks, Recreation, Center 50 Plus, youth development programs, neighborhood outreach, and homeless and sheltering coordination. So that was the big drop that you see from 2023 to 2024. And before we move on to legal, I'll just pause here to see if there's any questions on the city manager's office.
Yes, Member Manville.
Thank you, Chair. Am I reading it that you have 1.8 FTE DEI staff members, or is that like different expenses on DEI that spread across?
So all of these are position allocations. So actually, I'm not sure if that's a single position or pieces of a couple positions. But yeah, so currently for fiscal year 2024, it's allocated at 0.8. Seeing no more questions, I'll.
Member Allen, please.
So, really quickly, the 1.35 for organizational management, I'm assuming one of that is the city manager. I'm curious about the other 0.35.
Yeah, so I believe if you look at the left, you'll see a large cost. If you see the right, the FTE count. I do believe we have some consultant costs in there as well, but I believe it's a portion of the city manager and our chief strategy officer, Courtney Knox Bush.
Oh, correct. Shall you stand and any other questions? Member Dixon, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Josh, I think what I just heard you say is that the cost of consultants is split, is under a couple of different offices. Is that right? Where is the cost of consultants budgeted?
So I don't have the detail in front of me, so I'm going to not try to hazard the answer, but I can certainly get it to you. But I know that the materials and services costs and personnel costs are included on the left there in those total numbers, and we can get you the breakdown between those two.
Okay, thank you.
So Josh, I'm going to ask a question. I meant to ask this to Ms. Rutherford too. As we're learning all of the improved details of these different departments, I know that as we approach our budget meetings and have to get serious with cuts, I'm kind of wondering how each department is already looking at their areas. So I'm going to begin here with some of yours, or with the ones you're presenting. Can you give us an idea where you feel cuts can be made that will hurt the least?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. If we could, I have a slide specifically for the reduction options in a little bit, and if that's where we could cover it.
Let's wait for that.
I will say at the leadership team discussion, we've had this conversation many times. In the proposed budget you're going to get in April, it'll include some of those conversations, some of those efforts.
Thank you. Oh, Member Gwynn, go right ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just wondering what the communications strategy and delivery, those two FTEs are. I know we have a new communications director, but what's the other one?
Yeah, that's one of them. The other one is a communications specialist, so Kathy Ersprung.
All right, any other? Looks like you can move on.
So for the legal department, the city attorney did put together some notes here. This first point here, as we lose tenured employees, as we have retirements, some departments are very self-sufficient when it comes to legal advice. It's more of a final stamp of approval than actually having to review documents and go through everything in detail. So legal has taken on more responsibilities in recent years to review and do more of the work that had been on long tenured employees. Also increases in scope and size of city departments, increased general counsel support, as well as rising claims against the city, both workers' comp and liability. There has been some efficiencies to control costs. If you're familiar with Legistrar, the city council software, I came right when it was coming online, but before there was a lot of paper going all around everywhere. So Legistrar has created quite a few efficiencies. And also if you're searching the city code, you can look at MuniCode, and that's much more efficient than PDF documents. So on the left, this is the solid pie chart. I apologize for that. There is litigation, general counsel, prosecution. All those services are included in that 3.1 million on the left. And then on the right, you can see there is some cost recuperation from other funds at 0.8 million. And staffing has been extremely flat in the legal department. They do have a couple staff that are housed in other funds, in the self-insurance fund for a legal assistant, and I believe a legal attorney focused on investigations. So I'll pause here for any questions on the legal department. And we do have a representative from legal if there are detailed questions.
Member Manville, go right ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So my understanding, Josh, is that a lot of the claims against the city are private and not available, like we don't know exactly what the city's paying out. Is that correct? Like those are kind of an executive session and we can't, or how is, but if that's correct, how are budget committee members supposed to understand those?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. The final claim approval is in general counsel. It's approved in the full city council meeting. So you can see any final claim there. You can also, you'll see in our reserve requirement for workers' comp and liability, as we have increased claims, those reserve requirements can increase. We do that actuarial study every other year.
Okay, so we do have a list of all the things that the city has paid out, or that's public once it becomes final. Is it?
When claims are paid, yes, it becomes.
Okay, thank you.
Member Allen, yes.
I thought I would just follow up on his question. So is there a place in the budget document where that expenditure line or those expenditures would show up? Claims against the city?
There is, yeah, in the back of the book, in the fund summaries for self-insurance, for the risk self-insurance fund, you'll see claims and legal court services.
Good question. Anything else? Yes, go ahead, Member Hoy.
Maybe it's just curiosity, but could AI take any work from the legal department?
That's a good question. I did attend a recent session on AI, and they specifically called out attorneys, and they did, and it's been really helpful to look for case law to find things like that, what you might have a legal assistant do or a city attorney might spend hours and hours doing. AI can find extremely quickly, relevant case law. So there are some advances coming. I don't think we're there yet, Mark. Do you want to speak to that at all? And Christian is saying one of our use cases for AI is the legal department.
Good job.
Am I on now?
Yes.
Okay. Mark Weinstein, Deputy City Attorney, and I apologize for the face mask. I'm battling a cold, so wanted to keep my germs to myself. I think I'll defer to Krishna's answer on this, that AI is designed to assist humans, not replace humans. AI technology in the legal realm is definitely something that all of your legal research platforms are embracing, et cetera. But if you keep up on that, you'll find that a lot of attorneys have gotten themselves in a lot of trouble relying on briefs written by AI, all of which have been inaccurate. And then the courts come in and they're not very happy with that. So at least for now, you're all stuck with the legal department and the attorneys that are here to serve the needs of the city.
I was just going to say, so the use case is not necessarily to, eliminate attorneys from the legal department, right? So I just want to make sure that I say that. So I think what we are looking at right now, one of the use cases is to be able to each attorney to have their own assistant and help with their cases, right? So what we are working on right now is we don't want to put our content in public domain, right? So to be able to create our own custom GPT or custom AI solutions so that we have our own private domain and so that the information is secure. So that's a solution we are looking at right now. And that could be a huge help for the attorneys, especially with their workload, and we can train our AI on making sure that we are doing the right thing and we are giving the right information. So
it's fascinating. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just add to the fact that I really appreciate the fact that you're keeping ahead of any AI security because it is a huge risk. So thank you for that. Great. Go ahead, Mr.
Member Nordike online.
Oh, thank you. Member Nordike.
Thank you. AI cannot replace your attorney's department anytime soon, and I will tell you why. First of all, when you have a deposition and someone is questioning you under oath about why you're being sued as a city employee, you need an attorney. Secondly, when you are in court, you need an attorney with you. Thirdly, when you're in executive session with council and the city manager, you need an attorney with you. The areas where AI is being explored in the legal profession deals a lot with, say, legal research and contract review. Because yes, a bot can review a legal contract for changes, variances, and so on. It can read words, it doesn't understand what words mean. So having some expertise in this area, I can tell you there are potential resources for AI when it comes to the research and document and contract preparation. But there are too many other areas where it would be unethical for you to not have an attorney present with you. And believe me, when you are sued, you will want your attorney next to you. That's my comment.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Next is mayor and council. And I feel like we need a disclaimer that there is no compensation to the mayor or council in this cost center. It funds administration. So in this case, translation services like we're experiencing today with ASL in Spanish. It also, any food that's provided at city council. Also the federal lobbyists and state lobbyists are here.
Okay.
That second line there, the financial audit is funded by the mayor and council. The mayor and council select our financial auditor, our third-party auditor. And then also the hearings officer. So hearings officer for council matters is funded through the mayor and council budget. There is, if you see on the right, there is some indirect cost allocation plan from other funds that gets recouped. Mayor and council is kind of interesting. It's allocated based on agenda items that are heard before the city council. So it's really interesting to see who is before council the most, and that's who pays for the cost.
Huh. No, I have no idea.
And any questions on mayor and council? Sorry, it's just one slide.
Yes, it looks like we have member Nordike again with a question online.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. My question has to do, first of all, I'm willing to forego having you buy my food for council meetings as my sacrifice. I'm not compensated, but you do provide me with food, and I'm willing to forego that just to demonstrate my willingness to support severe cuts that must be made at some point. But my other question really, I don't know if my peers would agree with me on that though. My other question though, I've had constituents raise concerns about council travel, and I don't see it broken down in here, when, for example, we pay for attendance to out-of-state travel to conferences and such. That feels like a luxury expense to some of my constituents compared to some of the essentials like funding core positions. Whether it's in the library or other offices. So I would love to see a little more information on, and this would be a good homework assignment for our staff, I would love to see what the travel budget has been for council for the last few years, because as much as I know it's nice to go to conferences and do out-of-state travel, but those little things do add up. And again, sometimes, even though that's a tiny percentage of our budget, I think the optics of out-of-state travel, given our financial predicament, are not good. So I also wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Understood. We can certainly provide that detail.
It doesn't look like there's any other questions. Oh, yes, go ahead.
Just a clarifying question for Member Nordike. Would that be just out of state or in state as well? Because I know that we do League of Oregon Cities and mayor, I don't know what we call that, the mayor's league of some kind. But anyway, those are things that we participate in, and that might also want to be included in that.
I think that's a great idea. We might as well get a comprehensive view. Good suggestion.
Looks like Member Phillips has a question.
Thank you, Chair. And Josh, thank you for this. I guess my question / comment is in regards to the last couple of pie charts we've looked at. I think it gets a lot of focus because it's somewhat easier to understand as a community. Like, you can link things up a little more clearly. But my request and question is there a way to show orders of magnitude? Because we're talking about, less than $500,000 for this. Whereas, in proportion to the general fund, this is less than 1/3 of 1% of the total. So even if we were to eliminate the last couple of things that we've talked about, we don't get close to impacting our structural imbalance. So just the request is, I know that this is teased out and we're focusing on it specifically, but just how, is there a way to show scale and orders of magnitude when we're looking at this? Not to discount the suggestions of my colleagues. I'm, strictly neutral on whether or not we get food for these things, but I just don't see that impacting, the magnitude of the structural imbalances that I think we have.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. And I don't have it at this meeting, but at the last meeting, we showed all department budgets in a full pie chart. And I will tell you that mayor and council is by far the smallest one. So yes, we can certainly add that context. And yes, the food or travel for mayor and council is not material in the scheme of things. That is correct.
And then I guess it's kind of hard because all this stuff is siloed. I mean, I think I had the opportunity to go to a conference when I was the chair of the local cable regulatory commission, but I think that that's siloed and it's probably through franchise fees. So just teasing out those things. I mean, I've never, as a counselor traveled in just my 3.5 years and counting. I don't think it's super common, but as you alluded to, none of us are compensated. Like we have no stipend, we have no pay. This is just the support to do the things that we do. So yeah, thank you.
Great questions. Any more? Yes, go ahead, Mayor.
Thank you. I just feel the need to state the obvious that many in the community would argue that every penny counts. So I just want to state that it really is, even though it seems insignificant, it all adds up. So thank you.
Anyone else? Oh, do you have your hand up again, Member Phillips?
Yeah, I mean, I totally appreciate that. And again, that's kind of why I prefaced the comments that I did with, I get that people, care about this, but as why I'm asking so strongly for the orders of magnitude, the scale here, just because half of a penny is different than 10%. And it's just kind of like lining that up so that people can make a difference. I mean, I guess it's just, I never know when to comment and when not to comment and what question to ask to kind of tease this out for the community. I mean, the fact that our administrative budget and the FTEs are less than 10, I mean, is that something that we can compare to other communities, as well as showing scale? I mean, the fact that we have 7 total FTEs dedicated to running our entire city administratively, I mean, I just feel like there's a narrative that we're spending frivolously when in fact we've relabeled, positions and haven't spent anything new and are once again contracted. Like we haven't been much above 10 in the last 12 years. And now once again, we're well below that. So I just, again, for accuracy's sake, I mean, if we can save some money, I'm all for that. We're going to have to do it. But it's just like, I don't understand how you can remove all administration. Like, how does that work?
I think one thing that could help provide some context is Moss Adams conducted an internal benchmarking analysis that included the city manager's office. That could be helpful. I know it's come to this committee a couple of years ago, but we can certainly provide that again to provide additional context, specifically on the staffing that you were mentioning, Member Phillips.
Thank you.
All right, good. Anybody else? Thank you. Go ahead.
Next is the finance department. So similar to legal and the city manager's office, all in the general fund, mostly unrestricted general fund, some indirect cost allocation recovery from other funds, and then a little bit of general fund restricted because we have court fines and fees. On the expenditure side, $6.8 million. That's broken down into $2.6 million for accounting and reporting, $2.6 million for the municipal court. If you're not familiar, we operate a full municipal court with both a violations docket and a criminal docket. $1 million for the budget office and $500,000 for contracts and procurement, making up the total general fund. And here's the FTE count over time. The municipal court has been fairly flat over the last 10 years for the accounting, budget, office, and purchasing. We saw a couple position decrease over the years, and then the more recent decrease Christian mentioned when payroll moved to the Human Resources Department.
Okay.
Any questions on finance?
Yes, I'm going to ask a question. We've been speaking about AI. Have you found if AI can be utilized, again, not to replace anyone, but to support you as you're reviewing, whether it be contracts or procurements or other activities? I would think that there might be opportunities there that AI could support you, but again, not trying to replace anybody.
Yeah, agreed. So the way I've explained it to staff, because believe it or not, staff are concerned at some points. Accounting seems like something that would be a no-brainer for AI. It'll really mitigate needing to add positions in the future, potentially, but we would still need the staff that we currently have. It is something we're exploring, especially we're about to launch an RFP, a request for proposal for a new enterprise resource planning software. And that'll be a component that we're looking for, is kind of that generative AI portion for the analytics and processing. If you can envision, we process tens of thousands of invoices every year. If you could have AI look at those and make sure they're coded correctly, expensed correctly to the right account, it just makes reconciliation, it could make reconciliation extremely streamlined.
Yes, Member Manville, go right ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry, Josh, if I bleeped out for a moment. The accounting and budget office and purchasing staffing has gone down significantly in the last 2 years. Did you explain what that was about? I apologize.
I did. So that was the 4 staff moving from finance to human resources, and then we also had 4 staff move from finance to the customer service center. So the cashiering function, if you look at room 230, they've relocated down to the customer service center. No worries.
It looks like we have Member Phillips that has a question.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Josh. And also thank you, Member Manville. I think you asked my question to kind of account for this change. So that's 8 positions total that have gone to different areas of the budget. But in terms of FTEs, we're still pretty flat in the last 10 years. Is that accurate? It's kind of a follow-up question to Member Manville's question.
That is accurate. In addition to those moves, we also relinquished 2 positions over the last several years that went to the Information Technology Division.
Okay, so I'm going to think out loud because I do have a question here. So, I mean, again, we're flat, we're not down. This looks like we're down. Has the work remained flat? Like, has the time and effort needed to do the work of accounting and budgeting and all the stuff of running the city of Salem remained steady during that time, or has it increased?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. It's not something we talk about very often. We're not usually at the podium requesting resources. Yes, the work has increased. The workload has been massive over the last several years, especially. It's a really good thing that we got ARPA funding and COVID relief dollars. Those came with a lot of strings and compliance and reporting. And so an acronym I hope you never have to hear again is GASB. The Government Accounting Standards Board issues statements that you have to comply with within a certain timeline. So if you think of FASB on the for-profit side, it's GASB on the governmental side, and we've had a lot of them lately. So we've had to recognize leases as capital assets. This latest one that was just issued that we rolled into the annual comprehensive financial report was for SPIDAs, so subscriptions as a service. We had to recognize every subscription that the city owns, look at all of those, determine if they were a long-term asset and liability, and recognize them on our balance sheet. So there have been significant increases in addition to just the normal growth that we see. So more positions, more dollars, more activity, more invoices. We do have a great team. We have Accounts payable, we have 2 people in accounts payable. It's been that way for many, many years. Same for accounts receivable. I don't see that changing in the near future, but the workload has certainly increased in the last several years. Appreciate the question.
Thank you for that answer. I appreciate it, and I mean, it makes sense to me. I have a final or near the end question, which is, I think Deputy City Manager Kristen and Maurice mentioned earlier that when we contract or remain flat, when work is increasing, there's the possibility of opportunity costs where not having sufficient staff is hurting us. I don't need an answer tonight, but I guess my question or comment is, how can you help us understand what those opportunity costs are? I mean, it's not just for accounting, but I have specific concerns in this area. I mean, I think we're asking a lot of you, especially in this process of navigating through our contracting budget, in addition to just the work that you normally do. So, help us understand what questions should we be asking to understand those opportunity costs for not having what feels like sufficient staff.
Yeah, I really appreciate the question and the opportunity. I'm going to refer to that internal staff benchmark analysis that Moss Adams conducted. And it really is a measure of risk for the city. So if you look at internal services, we have mandates. So we can't not issue an annual financial report. It's not an option. Some cities, I guess, try to do that, but eventually you have to issue. You might be able to delay for a little while. There's certain things that you have to do. So it really is a measure of risk. So the less oversight you have, the less staffing you have in internal services like finance and HR and IT facilities, the more risk you might have, the less oversight you have over those functions. But we'll definitely get this group that internal benchmark analysis.
Thank you.
Member Stapleton.
Thank you. Josh, thank you, Member Phillips. That was a great question, and it made me think about the bond as well. And I know that when we issued the bond, and that just was a ton of work for Public Works and for the CIP crew and all those folks. What kind of impact did that have on your workload in finance? Or was there one?
Yeah, there's certainly an impact of any program like that. I mean, whether you're talking about urban renewal or a bond program, certainly getting it in the queue was an extreme workload. Currently maintaining it, there is some workload. Public Works Engineering does a great job managing the actual projects, but there is the baseline finance piece there also.
I'm going to make one other comment. I appreciate all the work the finance team is doing and the extra work that you're experiencing with the Revenue Task Force. And I question how your work-life balance is going. It feels like you must live here. So thank you for all that work. I don't think I see any other questions on this, or, okay.
I'm going to go past Public Works just real quick, get to non-departmental, then we're going to go back. Sorry, Brian. I had them in the wrong order. And I do apologize. This slide isn't going to quite match what you have in your packet. I made a quick change before we printed the packet, and then I undid it because I made an error. So I believe it's correct on the screen, but not on the slides in your packet.
Okay.
And just to speak to that real quick, that's a function of when I presented this, I got some feedback that we needed to separate out the general fund unrestricted dollars. So what that means is there on the left, under general fund, property taxes, franchise fees, city operations fees, and fund balance, that's all receded into non-departmental. It sounds scary. I promise you it's not. It's just all citywide costs, all general fund, non-department costs. So unemployment, things like that live here. So this is the portion that's not allocated to departments. It includes unappropriated fund balance that's being carried over, as well as the costs that are budgeted in the general fund. In that lower left corner, general debt, We just spoke about the bond. That's a major piece of this one. So general obligation bonds, property taxes come in, and then we pay debt service out of that fund, as well as the internal pension obligation bond charges and payment. Equipment replacement reserve, different funds and divisions pay into the equipment replacement reserve, largely for fleet vehicles, and it's held there. There is some general fund indirect cost allocation recovery for non-departmental costs citywide. And then there's some trust and agency. This is where all the miscellaneous state and federal grants that we've been expending over the last several years, this is the portion where those live. For expenditures, on the left there, this is not an exhaustive list, but I listed most of the larger expenses in non-departmental general fund. And then you can see the general debt there down at the bottom. But in the general fund, I mentioned unemployment, grants. So we talked about the Special Program Outreach Team, or HRAP. That comes and goes from non-departmental. The Cable Regulatory Commission, construction fund transfers for facilities or IT, the photo traffic program expenses, downtown parkade security, document services support, alley maintenance, citywide membership dues, and then the commercial air service support. So I'll just pause there and see if there's any questions about non-departmental. And I know there's a lot here, and we'll get more into it in April when you see the actual detail for non-departmental, but I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Doesn't look like there's any questions.
Great. Back to Public Works.
So what I would like to do, if everybody's agreeable, I'd like to take a 5-minute break before we get started. So we have a break. We'll come back and, what time is it? We'll come back at 7:52. We actually get 6-minute break. I'll give people another minute, but I'm trying to get everyone back in here. Thank you. And we are back on air. Thank you. I think we have Brian Martin here, Public Works Director.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, Vice Chair Nishioka and Budget Committee members. I'm Brian Martin, the Public Works Director for the city. You'll see up on the first slide there, we've included a few key statistics from each division of the Public Works for you to take a look at. You can kind of look through those things as I read through my presentation here. I'm not going to go into detail about these. Instead, I'm going to provide a high-level overview of the work Public Works staff do for our community. When people ask me what Public Works does, my response is always the same. We make people's lives better. Our operations team provides safe drinking water to homes, businesses, and industries. When you turn your water on, it's Public Works staff that have made that happen. Equally important to providing safe drinking water is collecting, treating, and disposing wastewater from your homes. We provide the facilities that allow you to flush your toilets and know that it's being collected, properly treated, and disposed of in accordance with state and federal requirements. We also provide the facilities that collect and manage stormwater runoff from your properties and all of the streets, sidewalks, and other impervious surfaces throughout our city. That stormwater is collected in storm drains, stormwater treatment facilities, and eventually infiltrates into the ground or travels to our local streams, creeks, and rivers. Maintaining our waterways is critical to minimizing flooding during rain events. Public Works operations staff also work to ensure that your streets are not full of potholes, that lane markings and crosswalks are painted, traffic signs are properly placed, traffic signals and street lights are functioning, and our sidewalks are maintained to the best of our abilities. Our engineering division designs and manages the construction of most capital improvements projects for the city. The current 5-year capital improvement plan includes approximately $400 million worth of projects. Our airport team manages the day-to-day operations of the Salem Municipal Airport, which accommodates over 44,000 takeoffs and landings per year, and this past year added commercial air service. During the first 3 months of commercial air service, over 13,000 passengers passed through our airport. Even though we're not Portland International, our airport security program was required to be upgraded to a Category 1 by the Federal Aviation Administration, which is the same level as PDX. We've color-coded a few boxes on this slide to point out critical aspects of our business that need to be mentioned. Green means a critical item is being addressed, yellow means a critical item is trending in the wrong direction, and red means that we'll need to take action within the next few years in order to sustain our programs at current service levels. I want to spend a moment discussing the red box here under operations, which highlights transportation funding. Funds for maintaining our transportation system, including streets, bridges, pavement markings, sidewalks, street trees, traffic signals, and landscaping, is relying on gas tax revenues distributed by the state. Annually, we receive approximately $18 million per year. That is not enough to properly maintain our transportation system. The only other funding sources for transportation infrastructure are bonds, state and federal grants, and system development charges. Unfortunately, these other funds are restricted to capital improvements, capacity improvements, not maintenance and operations. Our 5-year forecast for gas tax funding projects that our ending fund balance will go negative in 4 years unless we find another way to collect revenues or cut costs. So this is our chart of resources. As you can see, the utility fund represents over 80% of Public Works funding. We're fortunate that our policies allow us to evaluate and modify utility rates every 2 years. As a result, the utility fund is much more stable and keeps pace with consumer demand as well as operational and capital needs. I talked a little bit about transportation earlier. I'm going to go a little bit further. Transportation funds are restricted. That means the funds can only be spent in accordance with the purpose in which they were allocated. So we talked about how the state of Oregon collects and distributes gas tax funds. Those can only be used on transportation infrastructure. The same rules apply to utility rates, street light fees, and charges for service. They can only be used for the purpose they were collected. The trust fund that you see in this graph is used by the city for holding funds when the city acts as a pass-through agency. In Public Works, for example, when a future traffic signal is needed, but more than one development is required to contribute to the cost, the developer's proportional contribution to that signal would be deposited into the trust account until enough funding is available to complete the signal construction. The City Services Fund goes towards the city's warehouse, which provides goods and services to all departments in the city. This third slide is budgeted expenditures. So on the prior slide, if you recall, which I don't expect you to, the dollar value was $222.7 million. Well, this slide shows expenditures of $168 million. We talked about it a little bit earlier in some of the other presentations, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about it here. The reason for the difference is to ensure that fund sources have adequate operating reserves, debt service reserves, and an appropriate ending fund balance so that we can begin a new fiscal year without running out of money. The utility fund alone carries over $48 million in operating reserves and debt service reserves. This ensures that we can produce and deliver water, collect and treat wastewater, and maintain our stormwater systems for up to 120 days in case of an unexpected event where revenues drop. Okay, this slide looks very familiar to the other departments. This is our staffing over the since 2015. So as mentioned earlier, the utility fund has a rate structure that allows for employee growth in line with service demand. Last year, we added positions to comply with new lead and copper rules for drinking water, to keep pace with mapping and maintaining the increasing number of stormwater treatment facilities, and to keep up with the project delivery demands in the engineering division. The Transportation Services Fund has limited ability to adjust to expenses and relies on the state highway revenue funds or gas tax. Those are basically flat. And the reason they're flat is with all the electric vehicles coming online, we're not collecting gas tax to keep up with the pace of infrastructure needs. So on the transportation fund, I want to point out a quick note. You see the drop from 73 to 48 between 2015 and 2016. That was when, I'll go back here. I'm sorry about this, I'm going to back up a second. Back in 2009, Parks Operations was moved from the general fund to the transportation fund and Public Works. And the reason for that was Parks were housed under Public Works for what was assumed at that time would be efficiencies with how we use a lot of our maintenance vehicles and maintenance positions. So at that time, they were placed under transportation because our parks employees oversaw the landscape maintenance in our right-of-way, and they also oversaw street tree maintenance. And so for those services, the transportation fund covered their positions. For anything related to parks, there was a reimbursement through the general fund for those positions. So between 2015 and 2016, a decision was made, let's put them back in the general fund, and so there's a decrease in positions. And then rather than having the general fund reimburse the transportation fund, let's have the transportation fund reimburse the general fund. So the work stayed the same. It was just a way we transferred the money in the direction in which we transferred it. All the parks work during that time was still funded by the general fund. I want to point that out. And to this day, we still fund street tree maintenance with transportation funds. As far as the other landscaping work that happens in our right-of-way, we've been contracting that out the last couple of years. The last fund shown here is the airport fund, and as you can see, staffing had been flat up until the current year, where we added positions to support commercial air service. So that is my presentation on what we do, how we're funded, and what our positions look like.
All right, thank you very much. It looks like we have some questions. Member Quinn, thank you.
Good evening. First, Brian, I hope you're feeling well. I see you're still wearing your back brace, so I'm sorry you have to be here so long and sitting in these chairs. So
thank you.
I do have a couple questions, though. So for the airport, now we have commercial air service, and it's doing well. So I'm just curious about potential development on the south end. Are we seeing any additional, like an increase in interest
Yes, we are. So the airport owns the underlying land. We lease out that land to developers that want to come in and build some type of business or build hangars to keep their airplanes in. And so we were out touring just earlier this week. In fact, City Manager Staley and the mayor and I and our airport manager and Mark Bechtel were looking at all the sites and where development is coming in. It's exciting. There were probably 6 to 8 large hangar areas where people are excited and wanting to develop and build hangars out there. So that'll help generate revenue for us.
Awesome. That's question one. Question two, parking at the airport. So we recently reduced the fees out there as we're seeing more flights in and out. Are we going to anticipate maybe increasing that again, or?
So the parking is still a work in progress. In fact, when we were out there on Monday, I was surprised how few vehicles were parked out there. We think that the ease of getting to the airport and back from the airport is making it very easy for people to get dropped off. In fact, I think I heard during a recent flight to Burbank, the drop-offs were backed up from the entry of the airport all the way up around the corner, past where the Department of Aviation sits. So people are really making use of the convenience and not parking as much as we like. We are hoping with the increase of flights from 5 to 7 this summer, that'll help increase the parking, because parking is a key component to generating revenue for commercial air service.
I have more, but I don't want to take everyone's time, so.
No, go right ahead.
Oh, okay. So, shoot, now that I said that, no, the Hertz, what's happening with that building, and are we going to be leasing out a portion of that? Are we going to use all of it?
So we are actually developing concepts right now. Our plan is that we would we would utilize about 2/3 of it for airport staff. We would move some of the rental car companies' offices down there. There's still a little bit of space left over after that, which we could lease out to, folks, or if there's another city department that needs space, we could lease it to them as well. So
I have an idea. No, I can't.
ultimately, we would hope that the commercial air service continues to grow and we grow with it, and then we would need that space.
And last question, and it might not be for you, it might be for Josh. And he may have already answered this, so Josh, if you have, I apologize from the bottom of my heart. Utility fund, so we had an anticipated income. I wondered what that, now that that's in effect and we raised it in January, I was curious what the anticipated versus actual is turning out to be.
For the utility rate increase?
What the income is, yes.
So is there are you talking about the operating fee? Because the operating fee is not a utility fee.
I meant the operating fee.
Operations
Fee, yeah, sorry.
I'll get back to you on that. Actually, Keith just asked me that yesterday. I was pulling it up, but we'll get back to the budget committee.
Okay, sorry.
Before I take your, for those that are online, we cannot see you. It sounds like you're still there. Okay, thank you. So for anyone that's online, if you'll turn on your, thank you very much. Now I can see you, so if you have questions. Member Allen.
Thank you. With regards to the commercial air service, I know there was an increase, well, you have an increase of 5 here in the airport fund. I know that there was an increase of 3 FTE in the fire department. And there are undoubtedly other costs associated with that. Where are we with regards to the commercial air service paying for itself? Is there a general fund subsidy planned for commercial air service? And if so, how long is that intended to continue?
So I'll go ahead and start. So right now there's a general fund subsidy of about $652,000 per year. So we're hoping as the flights pick up, more people are using our airport, maybe other airlines come in, we'll be able to recoup that cost. Our goal would be within the next 5 years to be independent, but it's going to take, more flights, more carriers, and that's an uncertainty right now at this time.
Any other questions? Member Phillips.
I think Member Nordyke has her hand up and had it up before mine.
Oh, all right, then, thank you, Member Nordyke.
Thank you so much. So, question about the airport. I saw that Congresswoman Salinas had issued a press release on March 6th of this year indicating that she was championing funding for $850,000 for the Salem Municipal Airport for common areas like baggage claim, passenger queuing areas, and waiting areas. I don't know what the status is of that funding, and I also don't know whether our budget is incorporating this proposal from Congresswoman Salinas, so I'm hoping you can give me an update on that. Is this money we've asked for? Is this money we're getting this year? I'm not clear on that. Thank you.
So I'll try to address it. We did ask for money. It was more than $850,000, but we're definitely happy with $850,000. The plan is to use it for terminal improvements, as you suggested. This was just released within the last couple of weeks. We're broke free, and so I don't know when we'll see the first dollars coming in. We're going to have to, negotiate an agreement, with the FAA to receive that money. So there's going to be some time to get things in place to where we can actually receive that money and start spending it. But we are definitely happy that, that we were successful in getting that $850,000.
Great. So to be clear, our budget right now does not include the additional $850,000 appropriated by Congresswoman Salinas for our district.
Yes, that is correct. And in fact, it probably won't include it until we actually receive it, and then we'll do some supplemental budget process if needed. We want to make sure we actually have those dollars in hand.
Makes perfect sense to me. I just want to know where we're in the process. I agree. Until you actually have the money in the account, it makes sense that you not include it. And I really appreciate the fiscal conservatism that I routinely see from Josh's shop, because, we don't want to make budgetary predictions on money that might be there. So just as a general comment, I really appreciate the fact that it's not in the budget yet, because until it's there, you just don't know. So thank you for that. And I'm delighted that we did receive those funds. And I'm also really want to commend the city staff for doing everything they can to look under every rock, apply for every grant. Please continue doing what you're doing, because I have seen some tremendous results in that area. We've been getting a lot of grant funding from the federal government as of late for a wide variety of projects. And this is just one example. So kudos to you. Thank you for taking my question.
Before I get to the other people with questions, our city manager has a comment.
Just one point of clarification in regards to the councilor's budget question and the $850,000. That is for capital improvements and it's not for operations, so it won't change the general fund impact at all. So,
thank you. Go ahead, Member Phillips.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Brian and Josh. I just kind of want to start with some brief comments and then get to my question. So the fact that we have commercial air service, I think, is a good thing. As council, we supported that unanimously. I do, recall that there were some naysayers that this wouldn't pan out, and in fact, it has. The fact that we're adding a new line to Sonoma soon, that prospect is encouraging. And I guess my question on this specifically is we're expected to get to roughly 10,000 passenger trips this year, and does that qualify us for additional capital improvement grants from the federal government?
So we'll definitely exceed the 10,000 passenger trips, because we had 13,000 just in the first 3 months. But I think that 10,000, Mark Bechtel is here. I'm not sure if he knows that there's a threshold that allows us to get additional federal funding. We think we're going to get there. I don't know if that was 10,000 trips per month or what that number is.
Mark Bechtel, Public Works Operations Manager. Actually, it's 10,000 enplanements, and an enplanement is people getting on the plane. So We had 13,000 total passengers, both coming and going to the airport. So we've had so far about 6,000 enplanements in the first 3 months of air service. So we're probably, just because it's been a couple months since we got that statistic, we could be very close to 10,000 enplanements right now. We certainly will make it by the end of the calendar year. What that does is it then qualifies us for a much larger allocation of federal aviation funds for capital improvements. I think they're called entitlement funds. And so that larger allocation, I think it's well over $1 million in the periods that we get it, will certainly help us when it comes to the capital needs of the airport.
Thank you for that follow-up and information. That's what I was tracking as well. So that's really good to hear, and I think that's one of the reasons why I was so supportive of this move. I think the airport's going to be critical for maintaining our resilience and readiness for any potential future natural disaster. My last question in regards to the airport, but I may have one additional question that's off topic, is are there any municipalities that don't subsidize? I mean, 600,000 doesn't sound like a ton. That seems encouraging that it's only $600 and some thousand per year. But are there any municipalities that don't initially start by subsidizing, commercial air service?
I don't know. We'd have to check into that and get back with you. We can certainly do that.
And I'm totally fine with getting an answer later on. My recollection is that it's pretty common. I'm not aware of any that don't start by subsidizing. But yeah, look forward to that question. Brian, I don't know if you have more to talk about than the slides that you still have. Do you have more slides? Because I have a question that I think you might be good at answering.
These are the only slides I have.
So thank you. If it's okay, and I'm fine if staff want to redirect me to someone else, but recently we've had some reorganization within the city of Salem, and we've had some what sounds like improvements in our efficiencies and processes. Specifically when it comes to like codes and permitting and how we do that. And I think one of the prior members tonight asked, like, are we working with developers to be an efficient and good place for people to invest and build? So I don't know if that's enough of like a prompting to kind of talk about some of the things that the city of Salem has done.
Yeah, I'm going to ask Kristen Rutherford to come forward. She's leading that effort now, and I believe what we have done and working with the developers and the home builders is making a difference. But
thank you, Councilor, for that question. So following last year's Moss Adams study about our permitting process, we moved forward with a reorganization where we now have planning, building and safety, and the infrastructure part of development services that used to be in Public Works, all housed now in one department, and we're moving forward with implementing those recommendations. So some of the things that we're doing is bringing the staff from these three different divisions together to look at things like the back end, the technology side of things, to make that portal easier to use, to make our systems easier for developers to use, to look at creating one application process rather than multiple applications. So streamlining in those sorts of ways. Another way that we're becoming more efficient is rather than having something come in through the land use process and then kind of move its way through the full development process, is bringing all of those people together earlier in the process to look at the development and identifying comments where there are maybe some challenges with the site, and identifying those earlier on and communicating that feedback. We had been using a software called Project Docs that that was a big challenge for a lot in the development community. So that's something that was implemented about 1.5 years ago. And after looking at whether or not we could modify that software, make some process changes so that it would be more usable for the development community, we've decided to go back to our prior system. So we are in the process of unwinding that to make that also more efficient and easier for the development community to use. We have started a much more consistent communication with the development community through quarterly meetings with the Home Builders Association. And we're starting conversations with some of our brokers about branching out and having similar conversations with the developers outside of the home builders, you know, that are more in the commercial and industrial space. So we're approaching this on a lot of different fronts. And then the last thing that I'd like to mention, and this is an effort that Krishna and her team are leading, and this is through the Harvard Bloomberg program, where the city's participating in a data track, and through this we have staff through that program that is assisting us with looking at our data and our timelines to achieve some efficiencies there as well.
Thank you for that. And I'm sorry I didn't ask you earlier. It is a new process, but I am encouraged every single time I hear leadership speak about it. I mean, I think that it's super important to have an efficient system to allow investment in our community and building in our community. And it seems very intuitive now, or more intuitive, and has the significant potential moving forward. I just have to say, as a counselor and going on, you know, some of the project tours, like the downtown apartments, I think Rivenwood, what I've heard, the feedback that I've heard is that we're one of the best communities to work with in terms of like hassle-free, knowledgeable staff, good response times. You know, it's more complex in other communities. So I think we started at a good baseline and we're getting significantly better in that sense. And I appreciate you talking about it, because I think, you know, when people hear about reorganizations and see new titles, they may not understand that this really is real and is having an impact on our community. So I appreciate you talking about it.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I believe Member Belichick had a question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And thanks, Brian, for all the information. I want to hang out a little bit more on the airport funds, if I could. If I got the numbers right, 13,000 people seats on the during the first 3 months of commercial service. You anticipate the people of Salem will be subsidizing the commercial service at $652,000 per year for the next 5 years until it starts paying for itself.
So, yes. I'm sorry. Thank you, Josh. I had mentioned that 13,000 people went through the airport. Mark corrected me and said that's not how many people got on a plane. That wasn't an employment. So there are people getting on the plane, there are people getting off the plane. So that 13,000 is a total for both of them. So we would anticipate that to grow. Another thing I said earlier is we're going to go from 5 to 7 flights here this summer. I was wrong. It's 4 to 7 flights. Right now we have 4. We'll be going to 7 here beginning in May and June. So how will this fund itself? We don't have the crystal ball quite yet. I think this is going to take some time. We're still only basically 5 months into it, but we'd certainly hope to get off the general fund if we could. How we do that is not just with the commercial air service itself, but as we lease out these properties, as I think Councilor Gwynn had asked, what does it look like is there development out there? Every time we lease those properties, that's additional revenue that comes into the airport. So between a combination of those leases, more people flying, more people parking, over time, in order to attract an airline, there were incentives that were given, and those incentives cover 2 years. Well, once 2 years is up, the fees also go up for the airline. So at that point in time, we'll start generating additional revenue as well. So they're all positive things, I think, to look forward to. I wish I could say we'll be self-sufficient in 5 years. I don't know that that'll be the case, but we would hope that that number would go down.
Yeah, thank you. That sounds like a good trajectory. It sounds like we'll have more information about airport finances in April when we get into some details, but just a couple thoughts. If I did my math here correctly, it sounds like taxpayers of Salem are subsidizing each employment. I don't know if I got that right, by about $12.50. If we have the same amount of flights for the next 3 quarters of the year, and it's $652,000 per year in subsidies. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around how much Salem is subsidizing every seat that's filled, every ticket that's sold, how much those are being utilized by people of Salem. So I can imagine a family from Wilsonville coming down, filling up a row on a 737. How much was that cost borne by the people of Salem? What did we get for it? And maybe a nudge to the revenue task force and people involved in that. Like, can we just charge $12.50 more? So Salem's general fund isn't subsidizing those flights as much. So that's it.
Yes, Member Manville.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow up to Member Belichick's, those leases, what's the kind of order of magnitude that you mentioned 5 new leases possibly, like is that in the 5 figures, 6 figures, like give us a little bit of meat on that if you can.
Yeah, the general range of cost is about 35 to I think 45 cents per square foot of leased space. We have one company looking at leasing several acres on the south side of the airport. If that development goes through, I think that'll generate, it's definitely over $100,000 per year. I don't know what the exact number was, but let's say, $120,000. So that's a significant boost, right? If you think about a $650,000 subsidy, all of a sudden you take $120,000 roughly off of that. That's a pretty high percentage. So if we get more of those, and as we talk about the people wanting to lease space for hangars, and some of these are areas that they're considering are the big hangars, not the smaller ones that you see when you drive along Airway Drive closest to the airport. They're old, more metal buildings. If you drive further down south on Airway Drive, you see the big hangars that are much nicer facilities. The bigger hangars, the more space they need, and the more space we'd lease and more revenue we would make. So that's a really good sign for us to see quite a few of those spaces being strongly considered right now.
Member Stapleton.
Thank you. I agree with the idea that we need to, and I think that is the goal and the idea of council was to get, the airport self-sufficient as soon as possible. And I think we're going there. I think what we also have to consider is what has been the benefit to the city of having folks come in. I think that it'd be interesting to see the increase in top funds and other generating revenue from just the travel industry within the city of Salem that's coming from folks coming here, and also the businesses that are coming. I know there are a metal fabricator I'm looking at, and I don't know if we can talk much about all of that, but there are other benefits that are coming from this, and it might be good to get maybe a fuller picture of what that $600,000 infusion of cash is getting the city as a whole, instead of just looking at the one back and forth. Does that make sense?
One cost.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the business that you were referring to is Metal Innovations. They are relocating from the Aurora Airport here. They have connected with SeaTac. They are connecting with Garmin. So it's creating kind of a pretty cool little airport cluster of avionics businesses there. So it's still going to be a few years before they are fully built out. We had set aside grant funding to help with that build out. And Mark was just mentioning that there are 20 new airport specific jobs that have been created.
Thank you for that. That's really helpful. And then also, I just want to say thank you to Brian, and please pass along my thanks, and I think everybody's, for the amazing work that your team does. I don't want to say that Public Works is my favorite department.
You can say it.
I can say it? Okay. I really do just enjoy so much your leadership. That has been really important for the city, and I want to thank you for taking on the job that you have, and you've done an amazing job. It's not an easy task, and you've done brilliant. And just every day out there, I love seeing everybody out there in those City of Salem trucks, and I usually roll down my window and yell thanks, because it really is just kind of the heartbeat of the city, and I think that really, there's a lot of really great people that work for you, and please pass along our thanks and gratitude.
Thank you, and I absolutely will pass that along.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Martin, and it looks like we have Mr. Ingelston to come back to us about the reduction scenarios.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this might be recap for some of you. This information was presented to City Council on October 25th and September 18th. Option 1 was presented on September 18th, and Council requested additional scenarios that we presented on October 25th. A couple caveats: numbers change, things are updated, so you will see the impact of the option 1 in the proposed budget you receive on April 17th. We are projecting that it'll still end fiscal year 2025 above fund balance compliance. However, cost escalation that we went over on January 10th at our forecast meeting has made it so that the future year options aren't sufficient to maintain fund balance. So what that means is that additional reductions would be needed if we're only looking at the reduction side of the equation in order to meet that fund balance policy. So for fiscal year 2025, I'm just going to walk through these fairly quickly, and then we'll get to any questions you might have. All Salem funding for micro shelters. There is some potential state funding out there that'll continue micro shelters for a while. I think there's one that we're still checking on, if I'm not mistaken, but it looks like there is funding for those operations at least into next year. For the library, an additional 8 FTE. And just for clarity and context and transparency, this is in addition to the reductions that happened in February, where we reduced 33.35 FTE. Center 50 Plus, a combination of reductions and fee increases to get to 400,000 of impact, and the same for recreation. 700,000 for parks operations. This isn't necessarily an FTE. It's in contracted services and in seasonal dollars, but not full-time career positions. The youth development program, both the position and the grants that we issue. 1 police graffiti abatement position. The social service grants that were administered by the Urban Development Division. And then sheltering services. Safe park and warming. I will say we have a proposal that you'll see in the fiscal year 2025 budget to use some leftover state sheltering dollars to sustain safe park and warming to offset those. So those, we might have funding for 1 or 2 more years for those programs. Additional TOT support for parks. And then the Special Program Outreach Team, formerly HRAP, that we've talked about. And as Kristen confirmed, the program isn't going away. They have other grants that are funding it, at least in the short term. For fiscal year 2026, all Salem funding for the Navigation Center. There is, again, potential for state funding to extend operations. 1 fire station, 12 police positions, 10 of them are sworn. and then in fiscal year 2028, an additional fire station. And if it's okay, I'm just going to go through the rest of the options, and we'll take questions at the end. When City Council heard that first proposal, there was requests for, hey, what would it take if you continued the park rangers, you did the SOS team expansion, and you maintained the police homeless services team. These first two items have actually already been reduced from the budget, so this would assume that they would come back. And the reduction or trade-off would be additional cost recovery for both planning and recreation. No reductions to public safety. So this would continue these items here. So police crime analyst, fire training officer, no graffiti abatement reduction, no fire station reductions, and no police position reductions. All other reductions and changes from option 1 would still be in effect. And the trade-off is the additional cost recovery for planning, additional cost recovery for recreation, closing the main branch at the library. In fiscal year 2026, closing Center 50 Plus. In 27, eliminating 2 finance positions. And just one caveat, it's in the staff report, but when you look at internal positions, there is that indirect cost allocation. So if you reduce one position, you don't see the full impact from that savings because other funds help fund that position. So 2 finance positions, and then in 2028, some additional internal positions, 2 in IT, 1 in HR, 1 in legal, 2 in code compliance, 1 in municipal court, and 5 FTE in parks operations. Option 4, new or continued service, was to continue city funding of the micro shelter and navigation center. So it's very similar to the previous one, with the exception of 6 additional police positions being reduced in fiscal year 2026. And that's the 4 options. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. One thing I'll just say overall is I'm not showing you the dollar impact of each of them, but they were designed to be similar. So they were designed to meet fund balance policy for each of the fiscal years. They would for fiscal year 2025, additional reductions would be needed in the out years. And this is just provided to bring you up to speed with what City Council has heard. The thing you will all be focused on is that first slide where we look at 2025 and the reductions that are going to be coming to you on April 17th and included in the proposed budget. Happy to answer any questions.
Member Stapleton.
Thank you. Thanks for this. Always a good reminder, a good refresher from last fall. On option 3, which we heard Councilor Hoy speak to earlier tonight, this idea of no reductions to public safety. When we look at the trade-offs, by 2028, at that point in time, when we look at the next year, the 2029, is there anything left to skin on that cat, or are we into public safety reductions at that point in time?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. So with all of these scenarios, additional ongoing reductions would be needed each year. When you have a structural imbalance, you're spending more than you're bringing in, and your revenue doesn't keep up with escalating costs, you're going to continue to have reductions. This option 3, you see impacts to internal services, mostly because the library is closed, the Center 50 Plus is closed. There's still some parks employees there, but the majority of what's left is public safety at that point.
Okay, and then also, because this also includes the reductions from option 1, just remind me, I guess, I'm not sure if I'm going to answer this correctly. Would we continue our homelessness services outreach team and the SOS team in this model?
For option 3, no, we would not.
Okay, so we would lose those 2 officers still, even in that idea?
Small correction, those 2 officers remain, so that no reductions to public safety.
Okay, but they just wouldn't have the backup support of the SOS team, those 4 people from Public Works that help support them doing their work there.
The expansion, yes.
Right, and then also we wouldn't have the team from the Salem Housing because that's funded through a grant through the general fund, correct? Or no, that's shifting now.
It's shifting. I think the funding is a little uncertain after a couple years.
Okay.
But they're committed to maintaining support for city programs.
Okay, sorry, thanks.
May I take Member Dixon, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Josh, I just want to clarify. Did you say earlier that the amounts in option 1 are no longer adequate to balance the budget for 2025?
No, they are sufficient to balance the budget for 2025. We're projecting a fund balance, ending fund balance within policy compliance. It's fiscal year 26 on that are at risk, that they would need additional reductions to ensure policy compliance.
Thank you.
Member Curtis.
Thanks. So the state legislature just passed a very large dollar amount bill that funds housing. And it's well over 100 million that's going towards homelessness services. And it's just my belief that we cannot defund the homeless, the bulk of the homelessness services that we provide, because we heard in our last meeting last week that, there's very few calls, law enforcement and or fire calls that go to people in, homeless facilities. So it's kind of like, what Krishna was talking about, which is, it's, you look at the lost opportunity. If you cut, then how does that affect something else? So if we're cutting our homelessness services, and we're probably going to have to cut some, and I'm not up to speed on, all the different funding sources, but there will be some state money, for Salem, I'm convinced. So, cutting those services, which we may not think is something that cities should do, but that is our world that we're in, would increase law enforcement and fire having to deal with those crises on the street. So I think we really need to dig into, what are the funding sources that are out there. Yeah, we don't have the money in hand yet, but I think it takes, the staff should do some research on what the potential could be for Salem to get a piece of that state funding, because it's pretty significant. And I don't know how that's going to affect our budget decisions for 2025. We may not have that money in hand yet, but that would probably be the only way that I would support cutting homelessness services, is if we saw something on the horizon that would backfill that. So that's just my little soapbox.
Yeah, appreciate.
And we don't want to, if we cut those things, it will burden other areas of the city. So we have to think about that.
Yeah, certainly. With all of these reductions, there's indirect impacts to other city services and the community. I do believe at your next meeting in April, we'll have some really solid clarity on what that funding looks like for different sheltering sites. I do believe the majority of the micro shelters are funded through next year and not through the city. I think the funding will be going directly to the services.
Member Phillips? Oh, I'm sorry.
Hang on, when I move my mouse, it navigates away. I think Member Nordyke, Councilor Nordyke, had her hand up first again.
Okay, Member Nordyke.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Councilor Phillips, and thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to make sure, I would like to share these slides with my neighbors. I want to be able to please make sure that these are emailed to all of us, because I struggle sometimes to locate them in the agenda. So that's really my main priority because I need time to digest all of these options. I need time to talk to my constituents about how they feel. I feel strongly that outreach is a part of what I do. So I just want to make sure that these slides, including all these options before us, are sent to us. I really appreciate the comments raised by Councillor Stapleton about what happens when we prioritize certain agencies over others. I just want us to have all the information before this committee makes all the decisions. So I really just have a comment at this point. You know, to me, I haven't made up my mind yet as to which option I am in support of because this is still the information gathering phase for me. So thank you for presenting these options, and I need a little more time to think about it. And also, I want time to talk to my neighborhood associations. I try to meet with 4 of them a month to see what their response is. And there are other groups that I talk to too, of course. So it's really more of a comment at this point. Thank you so much.
If I may, very quickly, all these slides were emailed out between 3 and 4 o'clock this afternoon, so you should have them in your email box. And I will say for this body, for the Budget Committee, the year to really focus on is fiscal year 2025, because that's the budget that is going to be deliberated on, considered in just a few short weeks. The out years, while we would appreciate any direction you might have, each budget is going to come to the Budget Committee individually.
Thank you, CFO Eggleston. I sincerely appreciate you. I would submit that it's not only the members of the committee who care about these slides. I feel that they should be published as part of our agendas as a matter of course. Not only will it make it easier for us to find us, but everyone has a vested interest in our budget. So honestly, I feel like these slides really ought to start being included in the actual agenda when you click on the meeting itself. You shouldn't have to be a member of this budget committee. And so that's not a critique of you. I feel that this is something that I should share with our city manager because honestly, everybody has a stake in our money and how we spend their taxpayer dollars. So that's just something that I want to share on behalf of my constituents. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, and I will look for your email.
Mr. Staley, did you have something?
Yeah, we'll be happy to do that, Counselor. Obviously, we're trying to turn things around very quickly here and putting together agenda packets and getting information out to council before meetings is challenging with a 1-week turnaround, but we'll definitely get this information posted up on the website again so that it's available and current for everybody.
Member Gear, thank you. We'll get to Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Josh. As my 3rd meeting, you've done a great job of bringing me up to speed with a lot of information very, very, very efficiently, so I appreciate that. Just a couple of questions, kind of piggybacking on a couple other questions that were just raised. How many of the micro shelters are city-owned and going to be in that projected? Because I've heard both, there's going to be state-funded and also city-funded.
The micro shelters are city-owned?
Yes.
So currently, I believe one is located on city property.
Okay.
That's leased out to the operator, but the agreements are all with the service provider currently, and those are all scheduled. The funding's scheduled to end at the end of the fiscal year.
Okay, thank you. And then just another one. Have there been any projections done with shutting these down and the closures on the impact it would have on other services?
I'm not sure. We can get back to you. I'm not sure if the recent Moss Adams homelessness assessment included something like that or not. I know it would be impactful specifically to the SOS team, police, fire, those services. But I don't know if we have anything specific, but we'll find out.
Thank you.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
So I was trying to find that Moss Adams report on homelessness. It's really pretty interesting. and the funding comes from a wide variety of areas of the city. And they said that there was, I think it's 13.4 million in direct spending that the city expends for homelessness-related things, and that could be a graffiti removal person or money that goes out to a shelter, a wide variety of things, and then 10,000 in secondary. But I couldn't find it on the website, and so I think Member Dixon sent it to me.
We'll
And
certainly
so
send it out to the committee.
yeah,
and
because I
make
think
sure
it was
it's
in
easy to
draft.
find on the
I think it
website.
was in draft form. I couldn't find it anywhere, and I looked for quite a while. But I think that would be really good for us to see, because it does pull together all those disparate pieces, so we have a sense of, what's what.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Member Phillips, you've been waiting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Josh. In regards to the 4 scenarios that you outlined tonight, I appreciate all 4. I feel like I was advocating for scenario 2 early on back in September and October of 2023, when it was less clear that we would have some funding secured for the managed microshelter sites through at least June of 2025. I don't think we yet know exactly where we're at, but I think we're probably close to having knowledge that the Navigation Center and at least 2, if not 3 out of 3 managed microshelter sites will have funding secured through the end of the 2025 year, which is the end of June of 2025. So that's good news, because it would have an impact on our community if hundreds of people are unsheltered unceremoniously. That's going to have an impact on the emergency room, on first responders, on police, on everybody, as well as businesses in our entire community. So I'm glad to hear my colleagues ask those questions. I am hopeful that all of those managed microshelter sites are secure through at least June of 2025, and that we can expand in the short term, because we have more need than we have spaces. Given that it looks like there's some confidence that we have that funded, I'm less in favor of option 2, which I advocated for. My fear is that if we lose hundreds, 300 managed microshelter sites, there would be an increased need for additional park rangers and 7-day-a-week SOS team staffing. Given that we've got at least another year probably of resources, I don't think we need that as badly as we would otherwise. So my debate, and I think what I'm hearing in the community, is probably between option 1 and 3. So as the original advocate for option 2, I'm not really, scenario 2, I'm not looking at that one as much anymore. I'm debating between option 1 and 3, and that's where I start to have questions. I have, referred to this as a triage process. With this contraction of, roughly 4 or 5 million in the first year, and then up to 7+ million in the out years that we're losing with all these things we're talking about reducing, that's the size of the emergency imbalance I'm seeing. It's not precisely the same in all these, but it's large, 6 to 7 million. I need help understanding, what I have a fairly good understanding of, like losing a fire station, how devastating that is. That will cause harm and suffering, but like, what harm and suffering comes with closing the center for 50+? I'm aware that they do things like, Meals on Wheels, and that they're, integrally involved in keeping, people over the age of 50, as involved and thriving as possible in our community. And I have some genuine fear that we increase an increased rate in unsheltered status, in hunger insecurity, by losing something like that. And I can imagine that, losing a library, closing the entire library, probably also has actual harm to our community beyond just losing, the resource that everybody understands a library to be in terms of exchanging information. But there's got to be programs there too that help us prevent the bad outcomes. So as much as staff can, show us that, so that we understand as a community, like what we're choosing between options 1 and 3, will be very helpful. And then just to commend and recommend everybody pay attention to the revenue task force. None of these are without pain, and I mean, this is a big deal. We've got one more year where we've got a little bit of time, but then it's just terrible. So, yeah. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Member Phillips. Member Dixon, you had a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question, and then I have a very short prepared statement that I'd like to read, if that's okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Josh, the question is more of a request. It struck me last year that we didn't actually take a separate vote on the 2024 budget. And I'm hoping that even though, everything the Budget Committee does is advisory anyway, I'm hoping we can take a vote on the 2025 budget. I think it's important to be on record about that, and voting for whatever it was we actually voted on last year, the tax rate or a total amount for all of the budgets, didn't, to me, clearly put us on record as where we stood on the 2024 budget. So I'm hoping we'll be able to do that, acknowledging that it's a gesture. The second thing is I have a short statement about budget option 1, which, as I understand it, is the staff's recommendation. And I agree with some parts of it, including those that are reducing funding or eliminating funding where a temporary funding source has run out. For example, federal COVID funds or state COVID funds. I do disagree with those parts of option 1 that further reduce programs which are especially vital for low-income households. In general, I'm supportive of sustainable funding for police, emergency medical, fire, social service, and homeless programs. All of these are of special importance in a community where annual wages consistently lag the state and the nation. Half of renters are struggling to pay basic expenses. Roughly 26,000 people live in poverty, and just 1 in 3 public school students can read and write in English at grade level. These are people who often have nowhere else to turn when faced with crime, health emergencies, fires, eviction, or school failure. I also support strong funding to maintain city infrastructure, including parks. These services are of special importance to property owners whose taxes pay for city assets, and in the case of parks, to low-income households who otherwise lack ready access to open green space. And I support funding for a city regulatory structure that's reliable and responsive. This function is of special importance to maintain a level playing field for owners of businesses and private property. I do hope the city can take a look at the following areas for reductions. One would be reducing general fund subsidies for tourism, including all general fund costs for commercial air service. I think those costs should be covered from the Cultural and Tourism Fund. The second would be reducing subsidies for business and property owners. This group in general is doing well, with local gross domestic product per person at its highest level in this century, and the housing price index at its highest level in 40 years, at a level where now we are in the bottom 10 to 15% in the country in housing affordability. Third area would be reducing funding for the mayor and city manager, including consultants, travel, and lobbyists. The fourth would be reducing funding for public relations. In summary, and I'll wrap this up, when city resources are tight and many residents are having a tough time, the budget, I believe, should lean toward helping those in need, preserving assets, and providing a level regulatory field. I hope staff can show us what such a budget would look like. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Dixon. Appreciate your statements and your question beforehand. Really appreciate that concise comments that you've made. Are there any other questions?
If I may, Madam Chair.
Yes, go
just
ahead.
Real quick, Member Dixon, to your first question about voting on the budget. I guarantee this body did vote on the entire budget by result area, not by fund or on the whole budget, but every dollar was voted on and recommended by this body to the City Council.
And if I may respond, I understand that, Josh. To my recollection, there was not a separate vote just on the general fund.
You are correct. Yes, there was not a separate vote on the general fund. There usually isn't. Before we did result areas, it was generally the entire budget as one vote.
Member Allen.
Josh, I'm sorry, this is, if I read all of the minutes from the Revenue Task Force, I would probably have an answer to this question. Are they looking at the possibility of a library special district?
They are looking at districts, okay. Yes.
All right, thank you.
Member Hoy.
Thank you. Member Dixon, thank you for your comments. Much appreciated. The one thing that stood out to me especially is this Cultural and Tourism Fund. What is that for? There's quite a lot of money there. What happens through that?
Yeah, absolutely. We covered that last week. So the Cultural Tourism Fund receives transient occupancy taxes. 25% goes to Travel Salem for destination marketing. That's a contractual obligation. 10% goes to the Convention Center for marketing. And then about 15% is awarded for grants, both events and operator agreements for city-operated historic facilities. The balance is used for a combination of funding parks operations, so it does support the general fund for maintenance at tourism destinations generally, if you think of like Riverfront Park, parks like that. And then also some capital improvements at parks also.
Thank you. It just makes sense to me that we could call that part of the airport expense. So I just appreciate that point. Thank you, sir. The other issue I wanted to bring up is that these 4 scenarios were brought about in September, and that was 6 months ago. And what would it take to revisit these scenarios based on the knowledge that we've gained over the last 6 months? And I'm referring absolutely directly to what's working and what isn't in terms of homeless services, and how we might better appropriate monies to get to those programs that are working best to service the people who need them.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. The only option that includes homeless or sheltering services is option 4. The other 3, it ends city funding for those programs.
I guess I just want to comment that I appreciate what you had to say, Member Curtis, about we just simply can't do without that. So we need to find a way to make it happen. And that's where I stand on that, whether, and I think we need to find a way. So it's very important to me, and I know it's important to the people I hear from, so I look forward to figuring it out.
Member Phillips.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Josh, again. In regards to the current, pilot programs that the City of Salem has invested in and funded, I just want to make sure, in terms of the navigation center, the managed micro shelter sites, are any of those significantly supported by the general fund, or are they almost entirely through like the one-time funding that came from the state and federal government?
They are supported by one-time funding from the state or federal government. The one exception would be the SOS team that currently lives in the general fund. It does have grant support right now, but we're expecting that to end soon.
And I think that that's an important clarification. So I just wanted to make sure that's out there again. And when does that one-time funding, when's the deadline to spend it by?
For the state sheltering grant?
I mean, in terms of like, both. I mean, it's like the state funds as well as like the ARPA funds. Isn't it? Is it by the end of 2024 or can it go into 2025?
So the ARPA funds have been fully expended. There's no remaining ARPA funds. Those were needed to be spent by the end of the current year, 2024. The state sheltering grant doesn't have the same restrictions for the time being spent, but we do expect to fully expend it within the next 2 years, largely on the SOS team and then continuing the Safe Park and the warming services.
Excellent. Now, in regards to, oh man, I think I lost my question. There's a lot to keep track of here. In regards to the SOS team, that is general fund funded, that has the 2 police officers as well as like 4 or 5 support staff members. Under any of these scenarios, 1, 2, 3, 4, does it go away completely, or is it kept in all 4?
So when the leadership team developed these options, namely option 1, the expansion was eliminated, but the current SOS team was continued throughout the 5-year forecast. The impact on other city departments, other city services, without that team in place is substantial. If you remember back several years ago, before that team was in place, we pulled city crews from all over the place for 1 day a week, and it shut a lot of things down for a little while.
Okay, excellent. That helps me understand it. So it is kept in the scenarios that we're discussing as is because of the impact it has on everything else. That's good to know. It's kind of our baseline. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Gwynn.
I'm sorry.
Member Gwynn, excuse me.
Question. Josh, you said that one of the micro shelter sites was owned by the city of Salem. Which one is that? Because I know the Navigation Center property is owned by the city.
I believe the property on Portland Road, I think I just saw the lease get extended, but yeah, that's owned by the city.
Thank you.
Member Hoy.
Thank you. Josh, can you tell me, and I know we've talked about it, but it's been a while, what is opioid money and how much are we getting and how much have we already gotten? And what can it be used for?
I appreciate the question. There is a work session scheduled for City Council in April to talk about that very subject. So opioid settlements, you might have heard about them in the news. The city of Salem is receiving our share. We have approximately $2 million currently set aside in the trust and agency account. We're projecting to continue to receive those dollars. There's a fairly restricted list of eligible uses. That's something that we're going to be talking with City Council about how we should use those funds, either internally or granting them to other agencies or other nonprofits. But that's going to be a conversation for that work session.
And if I understand and remember right, that money will come in until like 2030? And how much is that a year, do you know?
That is an excellent question. The amount I do know is about $250,000, and I think it's through 2038 annually. There's more settlements, so I think there's 7 of them. I have visibility on 2 of them for the projection for what we're going to collect each year. The balance, I asked for the projection for the future. I'm still waiting on that. It's something they're working on. These are massive settlements. So there's a law firm that's managing the settlements, and it's a convoluted formula between state and local agencies for what money is received when. So I have visibility on those 2. I'm hoping to get the other 5 when they're available. But at least $240,000, $250,000 annually till 2038.
And is it possible that this, I mean, I know we're going to talk about it in April, but can some of this be used for some of the things we're talking about, homeless services or SOS team and that?
Potentially. We've had discussions with the city attorney about eligible uses. It's pretty narrow, so it really has to be focused on opioid prevention, opioid treatment, opioid mitigation, things like that. So there are slices of services that could be eligible, but that's again something we need to have a larger conversation about that administration and what that looks like.
Got it. Thanks a lot.
Member Manville.
Thank you, Chair. Just Josh, for my brain, it would be helpful to have kind of to Council Member Phillips's previous comment, a sense of order of magnitude with these things in terms of, okay, if we're cutting $1 million from the library, what percentage of the library's budget is that? So having a percentage alongside the dollar amount would be helpful for me in contrasting these various impacts. Would that be possible?
Certainly, yes, it's possible. And we have provided, in your question answers last week, it showed the impact of the projected 2028, so that departmental impact for that 2028 budget as a projection. But as far as these reductions in the current budget, no, we don't have that for you this evening.
Appreciate that.
Yes, Member Allen.
Just very quickly, we ask a lot of our city councilors, and I don't think we could pay them less than we do. And they can't always advocate for themselves. I just want to make sure that a well-educated city councilor is going to be able to make better decisions than a not well-educated city councilor. So with regards to what few professional development opportunities are available for city councilors, I just want to make sure we don't lose sight of the importance of that.
Thank you for that comment. I appreciate it. As one of the unpaid counselors. Are there any other questions? It looks not. So thank you, our CFO, Mr. Eggleston. I believe now we have an update on the Revenue Task Force, and Courtney Knox-Bush is coming to the podium.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I apologize for the lateness of the hour. You have been getting, and you can see this was dated for last week, which is when we intended to get to it. You have been getting regular updates from Josh Eggleston has been sending them to you. Thank you so much for reading those and keeping up to speed. What I'll do quickly is just talk to you a little bit about the Revenue Task Force and where we are and where we hope to be going. First, I just want to illustrate that these processes are occurring simultaneously, as you can tell from your email inbox. We are actually just Monday night, we were meeting in here, very same room, seating about 29 people if we're lucky. And it does not look quite as spacious when we do that. So while you have been talking about the budget, which we're showing over on your left, probably. You can see that the Revenue Task Force is also stepping through a series of considerations and some outreach and engagement activities, all to round out to a July 15 council work session where we're going to be presenting all of the options that the task force is going to be recommending. So I just want to quickly let you know that, as I mentioned, it's 25 members that have taken the time to both be interested and sign up and participate in the conversations. We have 2 alternates who are doing all the duties, all of the duties. And then we have 1 ex officio member from the Department of Administrative Services representing the state of Oregon for us. We have 7 task force meetings lined out. We just had the 3rd one on Monday, and the next one is April 25, if memory serves. We have just recently completed 8 focus groups, and I'm going to talk about that in a second. We have 3 town halls or community forums scheduled for April, and then we have a statistically valid poll that will be fielded in I think April 2nd, if memory serves. And we'll be letting everyone in the community know that we're doing that, just because sometimes it's a little bit alarming to get a call and somebody asking you for your opinion. You don't always trust it. So we make sure to put a little note on our website so that people have awareness that we're doing that. So the task force itself, it's broadly representative of the community. We got a lot of great input from the council and a series of conversations about how to make sure we were getting the most broad representation that we could from the community. We have each ward represented. We have 20 residents, 4 business or property owners, 1 person who works in Salem or volunteers in Salem, and we didn't get any students, but we did make a really concerted effort. It's a lot to ask while one is going to school. We have some age diversity among the group. It is concentrated in the upper age categories, and we also have some racial, ethnic, and language diversity among the group. We have limited housing security. Most folks who are participating are single-family owners. We do have 1 who rents, and 4 applicants who report that they have earned less than a livable wage in the last 5 years. So just to give you a sense of who's in the room, it's fairly diverse, fairly representative of our community. Oh, sorry. And then you can see at the bottom, we had specific designations for groups to make sure we were representing as we were building out the group. So we do have a Chamber of Commerce representative. Others on the group are affiliated as well. We have the Latino Business Alliance represented, Salem 350, and we have the city's primary employee union. So more detail about what this looks like. There are 2 slides that get into all of this about the schedule and the way the sort of the workflow of the group, how they're considering things, and then how that informs the next step. It's very iterative. So about those focus groups, and by the way, I do want to just say, while we've been sitting here, I saw the meeting draft, the minutes draft come through my email, so I know that that will be coming out tomorrow, and we'll get that out to you at the same time, so you'll have that. And what you'll see is a description of the focus groups. So just a quick reminder, focus groups are sort of scientific. It's not quite a statistically valid poll, but it is a way to try to get broad input on specific questions from a specific group. We tried again to do the representation that we could with all wards being represented, with 8. That number is a magic number in Salem, there are 8 wards. And it was designed to gauge people's general understanding of the city's fiscal situation, to get a little bit of a check on how people are feeling about and what they value about city services, and then get an initial read on what people are considering when the revenue measures are brought forward. What is most important to them about those measures? And so what we heard, and I did not come down here with my glasses, so I'm going to do my best from memory. They're up there. What we heard is that most people have some awareness of the city's fiscal situation. I think that says 86% knew something about the revenue shortfall. We had, oh, look at that. Ask and you shall receive. Yes, it does say 86%. There was a general awareness about the revenue shortfall. Again, 86% of people reported being aware of it, but they had different ideas about how to solve it, right? So some people wanted to see the solution through cuts. Some people wanted to see the solution through a combination of cuts and revenue. And then another whole group, about a third again, wanted to see just revenue as a way, don't make any service cuts. So it's a really interesting, representative, again, group of input. We also asked them to rank the things that they thought were most important as the task force is considering revenue. Sustainability was a key feature. So how sustainable is this source? Does it keep kind of growing as needs grow? That's my interpretation. And then legal viability was also really important. Equity was important, and impact on the environment and impact on the economy. And those 3 things the task force spoke a lot about, and needing to get a little bit more of a solid understanding about what those mean and how they would be measured, and that will be some further work of the task force to do. And then estimated revenue potential and the impact timeline were also added on Monday night to the criteria based on the feedback from the focus groups. The Revenue Task Force wants to include those in how they think about all of the options. And level of administrative effort was the other thing that was of interest to them. So those are the criteria that the task force will be wrestling with. We started with 42 options. That's quite a, 41, 42? We started with quite a few options, and on Monday night, the group worked through sharing ideas and information based on the rankings of how these things fared in a survey that they themselves took. They got a chance to talk about that information, and I think we've only gotten through half of them, but we have a solid like 5 or 6 that they want to move forward with, and we'll get through the rest of them at their next meeting to really pull together the full list for a lot of detailed analysis that we'll all do together. I want to also share that our next steps, we're really focusing on a big push for town hall or community open house focus. That's our next big push. We have April 10 in South Salem. It's a 6:30 to 8:30 meeting. We have a virtual meeting on April 16, and then and this is all over the place, and you'll get it again. So no need to, don't rush to write it all down. I promise you'll get it again. And then April 23rd is at Center 50 Plus. So those again 6:30 to 8:30. South Salem, virtual, and Northeast. So that is what we are doing, and I'd be happy to take any questions. I think that's it.
Any questions?
I was listening, and I did write the airport as an idea.
Member Manville.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies, I wasn't able to listen into Monday's meeting. Were the ones that were distilled out pretty much in line with the ones that said more viable on the chart that you've developed? Or were there some tweaks to that?
I'm just going to get my notes. It is true that the things that were of lowest interest were dropped from further consideration. So what happened was on Monday night, the task force was considering the things that were of lower interest, the things that were of moderate interest, and the things that were of high interest. And we started with the things of lowest interest from the group. And those were, I think, relatively easily dismissed because the group had agreed. We got right into the higher interest, the things that might be of higher interest. And some of those things were retained and some of those things were dropped from consideration or moved into the moderate category. And we did not get through all of the things that were moderate because I think there might be some more discussion about them.
Thank you. I'll look forward to the notes.
Thank you. I can try to tell you, I know that business license fees were retained. I believe that annexation of developed areas within the urban growth boundary was retained. Local option property tax levy was retained. Corporate income tax was retained. There were a couple of things that the task force members asked us to do more with around a legislative advocacy role, and those had to do with payment in lieu of taxes and I think it was marijuana sales tax and some other things where we are currently constrained. So they asked us to do more to advance that, to have more choices. Thank you.
I don't see any other questions. Oh, yes, Member Belichick.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Courtney, for that excellent summary. I learned a lot. It's great. I got intrigued by this potential or this survey, the statistically valid poll. So it sounds like the Revenue Task Force has a little bit of a challenge getting a true representative reflection of Salem based on the members on it. And I totally get that, understand. I'm worried about that happening with the statistically valid poll. So before it happens in a week and a half, do you have any more information about how people will be contacted and what the universe of sample will be pulled from?
Yes, I can. Thank you for the question. The city has a pollster in our consultant of record portfolio, and we use a company called DHM. You may be aware of, if you listen to OPB, you may be aware of them. And it's also true that they do our annual customer satisfaction survey with our services. And so they have working knowledge and awareness of us. And they also, I think we're at about 420 as a representative sample. I don't know, because that's kind of changing all the time. But it is true that they look at trying to match our demographics and trying to match through a variety of ways. And it's no longer just a call. They also can call to cell phones, they can text and get survey responses. So it's a typical, what you might be familiar with a poll. And so they will dial people, especially towards the end, if they're really looking for a certain person, a demographic or an age group, they will dial until they find that person and then deliver the survey. So it's intentionally trying to match the representation of our community. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Yeah, that answers my question. Just have that concern out there that it won't really reach everybody. And I don't have a solution or anything, but it sounds like you're doing the best that you can. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's also true that we translated into Spanish and English for the purpose of getting as many voices as we can. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Courtney. And let's see, we are now, it's now time for open discussion. If anyone has any discussion, I see everyone's kind of getting ready to close up. Are there any last comments or things that anyone would like to say? All right. The final item is public testimony, but nobody signed up, so we can end that. And I want to thank you all, staff and members. That adjourns our meeting.